Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Mays, and I'm the co-founder of Champions for Philanthropy. We are so excited to host today's event and present conversations exploring philanthropy and how sport can make a social impact. At Champions for Philanthropy, we assist professional athletes and other influencers with their charitable endeavors. So that's everything from helping athletes start their nonprofit foundations to managing existing foundations. And because having a nonprofit isn't right for everyone, we also assist our clients with creating various charitable initiatives and projects and connect them with existing nonprofits and develop a strategy for giving. If you would like to learn more about our work, you can follow us on social media using the handle Champions for Philanthropy. We are excited to present our first Student Sport Philanthropy Symposium to this engaged group of students and professionals. Here at CFP, we have been fortunate over the years to have a dynamic group of interns in all stages of their schooling. We've worked with high school to graduate students, all eager to use sport as a way for social change. It was important for us to create an event specifically addressing their concerns and questions about this space. We would like to give a very special thank you to one of our amazing student interns, Krista Westheimer, who assisted in all aspects of making today happen. We are grateful for Krista and all her work and dedication. And now I would like to introduce one of our former marketing and communications interns, Mackenzie Crana, who will offer brief remarks.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm Mackenzie Crana, a junior at Fordham University studying marketing, and I'm a former Champions for Philanthropy intern. It's really good to be back, and I'm excited for today's symposium. I've had several experiences in the sports industry, and I'd have to say all of my favorites involved volunteering and connecting with people in community relations. And community relations interests me because I think it's really great how I can connect both of my passions for sports and philanthropy. And I think it's really heartwarming when teams, leagues, and athletes use their valuable time to bring communities together. And that being said, I'm really excited to hear from the professionals in the sports industry during today's exciting event, and I will pass it back to Michelle.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Hearing from students and getting their perspective is so important to us, which is why we have our interns, both past and present, leading several of today's discussions. And now I'd like to turn it over to my Champions for Philanthropy co-founder, Alésha Powell.
Thanks, Michelle. And I'm so excited to get into our spotlight speaker. I'm honored to introduce Nicole Whiteman, CEO of the world champion Los Angeles Dodgers. Nicole is the Chief Executive Officer of the LA Dodgers Foundation. During Nicole's tenure, LADF launched incredibly impactful programming, including Dodgers RBI, a youth development initiative serving more than 10,000 youth today. With a degree in economics from Spelman College, Nicole was the first in her family to graduate from college and has a passion for education, equity, and diversity. Her unwavering dedication resulted in positions in investment management and publishing before beginning a philanthropic career as VP, Western Region of the Jackie Robinson Foundation. A product of Nicole's vision and unwavering dedication, the Los Angeles Dodgers is now the proud owner of an SPRY. Named the 2020 ESPN Sports Humanitarian Team of the Year, the highly coveted award recognized LADF's work as a team's official charity. The New York native has been recognized throughout the industry for her exceptional contributions, having earned the 2020 National Medical Fellowship Leadership and Philanthropy Award, the 2020 Visionary Award presented by Southern California Leadership Network, among a plethora of other recognitions. We would be here for a long time if we went through all of them. So Nicole, we are so excited to get started. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you and Michelle for having me, and thanks for everyone at Champions for Philanthropy for putting this together today.
Thank you. So for our first question, starting as a marketing analyst at JP Morgan, where you were with the Los Angeles Dodgers today, that is a big career shift. Tell us more about your journey in sport philanthropy, and have you always wanted to go into philanthropy?
So very long story, but you're absolutely right. Starting a career with a Fortune 500 company and ending up at the Dodgers Foundation is a very big shift. I am the daughter of immigrant parents who came to this country basically in search of an opportunity for their children, right? And for themselves. And so from their perspective, education was key. And so for me, from an early age, education was key, but I grew up in one of the greatest cities, obviously, in this country, New York City. And I had an opportunity to be, you know, a stone's throw away from Wall Street on most occasions. And I wanted to be an investment banker. My lifelong sort of childhood dream was, you know, I was going to go to school and come back to New York and work in investment banking. Do a lot of hard work and a lot of amazing organizations that supported me through a private boarding school experience in New Milford, Connecticut, and through you know, wonderful HBCU Spelman College. I did end up having that opportunity to land a position with JP Morgan Chase and, you know, start right off in investment banking when I came out of college. I realized early on, probably within about a year's time, that that was not what I wanted to do. Something was missing, something creative, some sort of passion. You know, I was very young, and so I'm proud of myself for at that time even understanding sort of that I knew that that wasn't for me. I think that our industries, so many industries differ in scope. So I gained a lot of core principles, you know, while working in the industry, from strategic planning to sound financial projections and team building and marketing and more. But I really sought an experience where I could impact the lives of others and those who really needed support. And I didn't really know what I exactly wanted, but I knew at the time that I was a product of so many amazing organizations and so many individuals who had mentored and helped me, that took me down a path where I eventually, as an alumna of the Jackie Robinson Foundation, I experienced the opportunity to basically join a nonprofit, the Jackie Robinson Foundation, and work in philanthropy, see the world firsthand. You know, as a product of the organization, I helped to build the Los Angeles office, and their mentorship and support of me, not just in my college years, but as a full-time employee, just took me off from there. So in a full circle of events, I accepted the position with the foundation. My love of philanthropy continued to grow. I finally figured out what space I wanted to be in. This opportunity to wake up every single day and impact lives is just amazing to me. It's my passion. It's what moves me. It's what motivates me. And then after sort of expanding my reach through some education nonprofits here on the ground in Los Angeles, I was recruited by the Los Angeles Dodgers Foundation to be the CEO.
What an incredible story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we would love, please tell us more about the amazing work that LADF does for the second greatest city, Los Angeles.
Yes, thank you. So interestingly enough, I loved in your introduction that you said World Series champions. I'm so proud to work, honestly, for the official charity of the Los Angeles Dodgers. And yes, we are, in fact, 2020 World Series champions, and it feels amazing. But the Dodgers Foundation specifically is focused on improving the lives of Angelinos who essentially live in the shadows, neighborhoods that have been overlooked for years and years and years, and helping those neighborhoods improve conditions as it relates to homelessness, to education, to healthcare, and social justice. The youth and families that we serve are predominantly Black and Brown youth. We do our work through a social justice lens, and so we are addressing the root causes of why our families are experiencing conditions such as poverty. And so we essentially believe that every Angelino should have the opportunity to thrive, whether you are in South Los Angeles or in Beverly Hills. Things should not feel different, look different. Opportunities should be available to everyone. And so from our perspective, we run programs, direct service programs for youth and families that get at sports, health, and education. And we also fund programs. We fund about 100 different nonprofits annually throughout Los Angeles, really helping other nonprofits do what they do, and frankly, giving them the Dodger brand as well to amplify their missions. We support some outstanding organizations, and our organization is a hub, right? So we're serving as an opportunity for major impact. We are using the Dodger brand to amplify philanthropy, to give a voice to a lot of people on the ground who might not necessarily have a voice. We do use sport as a vehicle to give young boys and girls a chance. And so a lot of youth throughout communities here are playing baseball and softball because we're giving them the opportunity to do so and alleviating any of the barriers that they would have to be able to play. And then we layer on top of that all of the education resources and health resources that we know their families need, like college access education, financial literacy, health and wellness screenings, dental screenings, all of those things that we believe make a whole child and frankly make a whole family. It's interesting when you talk about the Dodgers Foundation because our mission has expanded immensely. And I know for a lot of nonprofits, we've seen ourselves in a different way the last year. It's crazy to say that we're coming up on a year now, but we kind of went home with a mission, and we've all experienced some level of either mission adjustment, pivot, or reflection. And what we've primarily reflected on is that we've been doing this work through a social justice lens and serving the Black and Brown communities and those who are underprivileged in Los Angeles for quite some time. But we are now really committed to being intentional and laser focused on those communities in particular to help close some of the gaps that obviously are far more glaring now more than ever.
That's such amazing and necessary work, and so happy that you were recognized for that. And the Los Angeles Dodgers Foundation won the 2020 ESPN Sports Humanitarian Team of the Year, which is a major deal. What was it like taking home an ESPY and knowing the role that you individually played in making that happen, obviously with your team?
Yeah, again, what a year last year was, right? So in the midst of it all, in the height of a pandemic, to receive an award of such high honor from amazing peers in the space made us tremendously proud. It was almost this oxymoron, right? You're in the middle of a pandemic, the team is exhausted, we are on the ground doing food distributions and serving the community and trying to show up for people in the best possible safe way that we can. And we get this award, and it's the motivation that we need to keep moving forward. It was this validation and recognition in an amazing way. And we don't do the work for the awards, but at the moment in time that we received it, it was perfect. It gave us a chance to take pride in our work. It gave us a chance to be completely encouraged and hopeful in moving forward to continue to provide our youth and families with the services that we have been providing and that we will continue to provide. Again, it was the greatest form of validation. I think that our team was elated, right? For me as a leader, to have your team have that feeling. I've spent the last 8 years building a team of individuals who work so hard and day in and day out. Their tremendous effort sometimes is in the background, and it isn't necessarily something that people talk about or see all the time. So for me personally, as a leader, I loved that it fueled our team. It gave us a great appreciation for the work that we do. It gave us a great motivation to keep moving forward. I think one of the things that I will cherish the most is how much my children were able to appreciate the award as well. We all are at home. And so while in a normal year, we would have been in downtown Los Angeles accepting this award as a team on a stage, giving a speech, that wasn't the case. But it didn't matter because yes, I was in my living room, jumping up and down, screaming and on Zoom with my team. But there was something about that was really special for my 2 young sons, right? And for my husband, and for me to experience that with my family. It was a very emotional moment that I will never forget. I was beyond excited. The excitement lasted a pretty long time. Believe it or not, it was Father's Day. My husband said that was the best Father's Day gift he had ever received. I felt like I was taking over that day in general with this award, but just really, really proud. It was a moment that I know I will never forget, and I know our team will never forget.
Much deserved. And like you mentioned, a lot of work in sport philanthropy is really in the background, right? It's sport. People think of sports being so glamorous, and it is glamorous, but that's the part that you see. But the philanthropy piece, it is a lot of boots on the ground, grinding. So to be able to be recognized for that, congratulations again.
Thank you. Thank you.
So this is a Student Sport Philanthropy Symposium. So how would you encourage the students in the audience to get started in the world of sport philanthropy?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to congratulate them all for participating today. You have to show up. You have to be willing to receive information, to network, and to be in environments like this that are going to teach you how to get there. I think that one thing that people need to do is start by engaging in philanthropy in general. And people think philanthropy is this big, big word, but it means volunteering in your community, at your school, at your church, or wherever you see a need. Obviously, right now, I encourage people to do that safely in the midst of the pandemic. But when we do go back to our new normal, thinking through how you can be involved in things that are part of your daily life. Volunteering is a huge part of understanding philanthropy, and it's a networking tool. It gives you the chance to meet a number of people. There's we have to pay the bills. I get that, right? But at the end of the day, where you get to put your time in, I believe that it will be returned 10 times over. Additionally, I would say look for internship opportunities by first making a list of organizations whose missions and visions you align with. I always tell people my power is my story. I'm not going to do anything in philanthropy that I'm not passionate about, because I think you are more productive and you're frankly a great asset to the organization. And it's mutually beneficial if you can do it where you feel passionate. So if there's a team you're passionate about, if there's a city you're passionate about, if there's a cause you're passionate about, put those organizations on your list and start to make connections there. I believe in being intentional about what you want, and I encourage students to be open to the fact that an opportunity may present itself that's very different from what you initially think, where you initially thought you needed to be. So we talked about my path in the first question. There are some things that you're going to have to do before you get to what you want to do. And I think that's okay. I think that's absolutely okay, because along the way, you're going to meet people, you're going to meet mentors, you're going to meet sponsors, and they'll get you to where you need to be. And those things that you do will get you to where you need to be. So it's absolutely fine to say, like, I want to work in Major League Baseball. But be open to the opportunities that you might experience before you get to Major League Baseball. Or I want to work for the, Lakers Foundation, but, be open to the opportunities that you might have before you get there. All of my previous experiences were a melting pot to where I am today. I bring all my mentors, my previous mentors, to this experience. I bring their resources, their thoughts, all of that. Connections with people are so important. We have so many mechanisms today to do that. And so it just doesn't have to happen in person. And over the last year, we've all figured out how to do it with all of this technology on a pretty regular and consistent basis. And so taking advantage of, connecting with people, whether that be on LinkedIn or, via third parties or whatever it might be, to do informational interviews, to ask how they're doing, to essentially ask how they've done it, to potentially, really get connected to people and follow people, again, who are on that short list of organizations that you love and you have a passion for, and focus on, what is it that's making them successful, and try to, mock those things and try to think about, are those the things and the qualities that I have or the qualities that I want to develop to get there.
Oh, such great advice. And I think people take that for granted sometimes, especially younger students, that every situation or every position that you're in all leads up to eventually where you want to be. So to really not take for granted opportunities that may not be the LA Dodgers Foundation right now, but you can work for a minor league team, or your college team in the sport philanthropy space, and it'll all get you to where you want to be eventually. So sage wisdom. All right, Sage. So you sit on a lot of committees and boards in the LA community, such as Women in Sports and Entertainment, LA Community Leaders, A Better Chance, Inc., Los Angeles County of Education, and more. How does being a member of these organizations help you understand and serve the LA community better? And do these organizations make you a better leader?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So I believe that I'm learning every single day. Just because I have the title CEO doesn't mean that I know it all. Sitting on various, group boards, association boards, being a member of several different organizations, it helps me to continue to hone my skills. It helps me to continue to learn. Sometimes when we're in our own positions, we're sort of insulated, right? We're thinking about our brand and what it is that we do, and it can close you off a little bit. Being a part of so many different organizations and groups really gives me the opportunity, frankly, to engage with a lot of different people and continue to learn from a lot of different people. I also get to understand how the things that I know can contribute to other organizations as well. I'm a sort of open heart. I wake up every day to be helpful to people, to be helpful to organizations, to be helpful to families. And so that just doesn't happen within the Los Angeles Dodgers Foundation. I get a lot of gratitude, and I'm re-energized by doing it for a number of organizations and a number of individuals. I think that in order to be a game changer, you have to have diversity in thought, diversity in belonging, diversity in organizations. And so for me, that sort of myriad and that circle of every place I feel that I belong is really important. Places where I volunteer, I said it before, when I answered the last question, most of these they're not paid positions, right? So from a volunteer perspective, again, I am continuing to develop myself as an individual in sport philanthropy. And I think that that's really, really important.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So what advice would you give athletes and others about using sport to make a social impact?
So it's crazy because the last year is the perfect example of players and athletes, individuals as a whole, thinking through how they can use their platform and how we all can use our platforms to be a voice, right? The pandemic hit pretty hard. The social unrest of 2020 was a real reckoning for a lot of us. And I loved working with our Dodger players, who many don't identify as Black or brown, who said enough is enough, who asked, what can I do? Who said, how do I use my platform? And Nicole, let's take action. Let's work together and make some things happen. I know right now that, there's a lot of players being told to sort of shut up and dribble. I have clear admiration for LeBron James for the way in which he is using sport to make social impact. And I think that players should use their platforms to do so. And frankly, everyone in sport philanthropy should use their platform to do so. It is not just about baseballs and softballs and basketballs and footballs and kids in jerseys on fields. It's bigger than that. It's about providing opportunity, and that opportunity lies in social impact, which is about race, which is about economics, which is about impoverished communities, which is about gender, all of those things. And so I think that while a lot of athletes could sit quietly, and some still are, I think people are still trying to find their place. They do need to say, what can I do to help? And how can I help? And how can I be a part of some of the movements that are happening to ensure that social impact is happening, all over the country, frankly, and then all over the world. We have to move out of a place where our country is telling our athletes to stay in their place. We have to move out of a place where sport philanthropy is not necessarily at the forefront. It is our place. It is our field. It is our court, all of those things, however you define it. But we can't let anyone convince us that we're not using those spaces, those places, and our voices to impact the lives of those who live in the shadows.
So true. And you talked earlier about how the work that you do with LADF is from a social justice lens. And when you got started in sport philanthropy, did you anticipate that social justice would be the direction that you would be moving towards, or did it just naturally happen?
Yeah, I think it naturally happened. And I think, I pair my personal experiences with my professional experiences. That has been a huge reflection for me on 2020 as well. When those two things go together, I can't ignore the fact that the same hatred that can be directed at a Black or brown community, I could be that individual, right? So could several people on my team. It's important for us to, again, be in it for the mission that is defined and be ready to sort of help those communities. But it's also important for us to have that passion, right? And so I have a passion, so I'm always going to lead through a social justice lens. I'm always going to say, hey, let's be really intentional about this, because this is the outcome that we will receive. It just doesn't make any sense to me to do it any other way.
Absolutely. And here at Champions for Philanthropy, our focus is on philanthropy, but we knew that it was a time that we had to at least shine a light on what athletes were doing in the social justice, especially within the last year. So that's why we started Why We Can't Wait, which highlights and focuses on the work that athletes, teams, and leagues are doing in the social justice space to make sure that that conversation moves forward. So definitely understand that. So we have got some audience questions that we're going to get into now.
Okay.
So the first question here is, as a native New Yorker, how are you able to integrate into a new community of Angelinos to recognize and honor the needs of a different community of locals when planning programs and initiatives?
Yes, I will say that initially, pretty hard, right? I came from New York City 20 years ago. I've been in LA for 20 years now. I think time has obviously been extremely helpful. I've been here for some time, but the first couple of positions that I had were, I was based in LA, but I would travel a lot of different places. And so I wasn't on the ground in LA and hadn't really understood LA, meaning the education system, communities, et cetera. Over time, working with actual organizations that were here on the ground, I gained a real understanding for the education system, specifically public education, for neighborhoods. And I found so many similarities with communities that I grew up in New York, or just with inner city in general. Urban cities are urban cities. And Black and brown people in urban cities are facing so many of the very same things, no matter what city it is or how big it is. So initially, yes, my husband and I joke all the time about how we came to Los Angeles because of the beautiful beaches and the sunny weather and all of that. And it was Hollywood and it was Santa Monica. And we were like, we'll be here for about 2 years and then we're heading back to New York. But a combination of career success and a real understanding of the communities on the ground here, coupled with the fact that I had 2 beautiful boys that were born here in Los Angeles and this became home for them. All those things definitely grounded me, and they made me want to understand the city more, and own the city more. I am a New York, I'm a native New Yorker. There's no taking that away. I love New York. I love the city that grew me, right? It's those concrete jungles that make me who I am today. That's the backbone I carry regardless. But I have so much love for the city of Los Angeles and the people who are in the so many amazing communities on the ground here. There's a lot of culture, there's a lot of diversity. Sometimes it's hidden and it's not necessarily at the forefront because a lot of it exists, unfortunately, in some of our poorer communities. But I love both cities equally, honestly.
And I feel the same way. We've had that conversation.
Yes.
A love of 2 cities, 2 very different cities, but like you said,
Yes.
a lot of similarities there.
Yes.
So what skills, whether social or technical, have been most significant during the early stages of your career?
So I'm going to start by, before I even say what skills or technical pieces, hard work is the backbone to all of it. So before you even start to think about specifically, I have to hone in on this, specifically, I have to hone in on this, understand that everything you do and the success that wherever you're going to get, hard work is going to be so important. I think under the networking part of it, as I mentioned before, is huge. Confidence is huge. Always sort of writing down and taking note of where you want to be, or when that shifts, rewriting that down. Conversations and being willing to talk to people, being willing to open your circle, very, very important. Resilience and perseverance, absolutely. Let's think about how we dealt with 2020. It's absolutely important for us to be ready for whatever comes. The pandemic's not going to be the last thing that all of us are going to face in our lifetime. And so having that sense of resilience and perseverance to keep moving forward is so important. I definitely feel like, everyone's a leader in your own right. A lot of people say to me, young people who I mentor, well, I'm not a leader, or I'm not going to be at the top of, whatever industry I want to be in. Yeah, but you're a leader in your own right, on whatever level you are, on whatever circle you're in. And a lot of that has to do with confidence. A lot of that has to do with, really understanding your craft, and being knowledgeable, being educated, all of those things. So there's a bucket of skills and things that you will need along the way. And supportive from others, huge. And so that doesn't have to necessarily come from your parents. My parents laid an amazing foundation for me. So it could come from your parents. It could come from friends, peers, as I mentioned, mentors, sponsors, et cetera. That support is so important. It just is.
No, absolutely. And you made such a great point there about you can be a leader in your community, but you can be a leader of yourself, right? So like making sure that you have that confidence to lead.
Yeah, and if I just want to add one more thing, just to answer your technical part of it, the reality is this is the world we live in, right? We got home and I was literally like, what's Zoom? Oh my gosh, know all of that. Be ahead of the curve, understand all that. Now we're all Zoom masters and we've got Zoom fatigue, but there's so many things that are evolving every single day. If you're ahead of the curve from the technical perspective, I just believe it can only be a significant help.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And with that, I cannot thank you enough for an incredible conversation filled with so many words of wisdom and gems for the students and professionals on the call. So we thank you so much for your time. We thank you for the amazing work that you do in the Los Angeles community and beyond. And we appreciate you being on our first ever Student Sport Philanthropy Symposium.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And again, thank you to all the students that tuned in today. I hope you have great takeaways. I know there's an amazing lineup for the rest of the day, so enjoy it, take it all in.
Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you.
Have a great day. So, wow, what an incredible conversation. We are so grateful to have Nicole join us and share her words of wisdom. And we're excited to get into the first panel for the day. So we have our social justice panel moderated by Tiffany Aidoo, and Tiffany will introduce the rest of our panelists. This is going to be an incredible topic building off of the conversation that Nicole mentioned. Philanthropy is obviously helping and giving back, but how do you view sport philanthropy through a social justice panel? And we're fortunate to have a great group of panelists here who will be able to lead that conversation and explain more.
Yes, we are so excited to hear this next panel on the topic of social justice. This panel is going to be led by Tiffany Aidoo, New Orleans Program Officer at Laureus Foundation, USA. Tiffany has a lifetime of experience as a high-level performing athlete and nearly a decade in advocating that sport is a catalyst for social change. Prior to joining Laureus, she worked with the NOLA for Life program, a comprehensive murder reduction strategy. Tiffany successfully led the Midnight Basketball and Mentoring programs. A graduate of Tulane University, she also has experience working within collegiate athletics, nonprofits, and various types of local and national stakeholders. Her passion for sports as a tool for social change transpired through her journey as a student athlete and professional experience. And now I'll turn it over to you, Tiffany.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for the introduction. Before we get started, I'm actually going to pitch it back over to our panelists to introduce themselves. I'm really excited about this conversation today. We just had a wonderful session with Nicole and Alésha, and so really excited to lead into today's panel session. So I believe Angela is on the screen right now, so if you want to go ahead and kick us off and introduce yourself, and then we'll go ahead and allow the other panelists to chime in.
Sure. Thank you, everyone. My name is Angela LaChica. I'm the founder and CEO of LaChica Sports and Entertainment. And one of our most important roles right now is the management firm for Players Coalition, which is a group of professional athletes who are working to impact social justice.
Thank you. Vincent, would you like to share a little bit?
Sure thing. My name is Vince Pierson. I'm founder and CEO of VSP Diversity Solutions. Providing strategic consultation and education and workshops for a variety of agents, the niche in the sports industry. My background is I spent 5 years with minor league baseball, building out our first ever diversity initiative. And then I did a stint at Bloomberg doing the same with the global leaders of businesses. And now I've been independent for the past year, running my own consultancy.
Wonderful, thank you. And then I believe, Colin, I'm not seeing you on my screen, but that's just the complexities of Zoom. So if you're with us, love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tiffany. Pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Colin Williams. I am a Senior Director of Leadership and Education with the 501c3 national nonprofit that goes by the name of RISE. We essentially create curriculum that's used to help educate folks around different topics around race. So really, I am a professor who doesn't work and operate in a standard classroom, but I'm in a lot of locker rooms and a lot of boardrooms having conversations with folks to think about the topics around race, diversity, and inclusion, as well as the skills that go along with them.
Wonderful. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. Before we get started, I just really wanted to frame today's conversation and say thank you to all the students who have joined us today from across the country. As Nicole said earlier, showing up is one of the most important things you can do to continue to move in the journey that you want to in order to meet your destination. And so as a former student athlete myself, this was an important conversation that I wish I had to really understand and learn more about sport philanthropy. A lot of this work isn't as difficult as we make it out to seem. A lot of this work is everything that we see happening every day, especially over 2020. We've had, the racial injustice, education systems, thinking about immigration laws, all of these things feed into that. And so as you step into your communities as a student, learn more about that, be open to it. So with that being said, I will go ahead and pose the first question of the day, and any of you panelists, feel free to chime in, but if not, I'm happy to call on anyone because I know you guys are all experts in this. And so, I would love to learn a little bit more about your work, especially as it relates to social justice. And so if any of you want to go ahead and kick us off, love to hear from you.
I'll go ahead, I'll jump in. So our work right now with the Players Coalition, we're a group, it's an independent 501c3 and 501c4 group of professional athletes across 10 different sports leagues now, who are working to address systemic racism in our criminal justice system, education equity in our education system, addressing police community relations, as well as economic advancement. So there's 4 guiding objectives that our athletes work with, and we really target anything with a call to action or making sure that we're solution oriented. So we're looking at pieces of legislation that will impact hundreds of thousands of community members. We're working across on the education side, making sure that we're addressing resource funding and connectivity issues. So really using the players platform with intention and responsibility to make sure that we're making the most impact, but that we have the most return on work when we're asking any of them for all support of any of those issues.
Wonderful, thank you. Vince, would you like to, yep.
Yeah, I figured, I guess we can honor the original order. And so for me, in the work that I do with my consultancy, I try to center equity and justice in any conversation that's being had. So when I'm coaching executives and we're talking about diversity and inclusion, we do so in a general way so that we can kind of move from wherever we are to the next phase of their own journey, but also encourage that we think through this power of sports concept that we all love and reimagine what it looks like when we activate the power of sports. We oftentimes look at athletes like they're the ones that are supposed to drive change. And that is true, they can in their own right. But what about those of us who are pulling the strings and making our organizations, our teams and leagues and these agencies run? If we could all have a mindset that's focused on equity and thinking about justice more proactively, then I think the sports industry as a whole will start to recognize what the true power of sports can be. So I try to center it in that way. At minor league baseball, we had several programs that were very specific, and I think that's part of social justice. I think that's part of diversity and inclusion. It's part of why I love Rise, Colin. I think we talked about that before. You can't be afraid to center a specific topic, right? You can't be afraid to center a specific piece of legislation and say, this is where we're putting our eggs into this basket for Q1 through 3 of this year. So we were intentional about centering race when we identified that as a specific challenge for us. We were specific about censoring gender when we recognized that we have 160 general managers and 5 of them are women. It's not always easy, especially within the systems that aren't typically used to centering that conversation. But I think, for us and those that are trying to advocate for justice, that's part of the charge, I think. So that it really is, I try to incorporate that to be central into any conversation that I'm having with partners and clients.
So I think for us at Rise, when we think about the concept of social justice, right, and really just how do we achieve fairness, that is at the core of our work. It's what we do. So if it's like, what do you do at Rise? Sort of, we are first and foremost an education organization, right? We seek to educate, but then what are we educating about? We're educating about race with the intention of creating and leading to social justice, right? So everything we do sort of comes from the backdrop of how do we get folks to do some of the things that Angela and Vincent are talking about, to have those dialogues, to take those actionable steps with organizations. How do we get to that place, particularly ones that are predominantly white, right? So some of these perspectives or predominantly male, or some of these perspectives are missing for the conversation. So how do we have that dialogue first to help folks understand what the climate is, why these issues are important, why some people might feel or lack thereof a sense of belonging in the workspace, right? Where do some of these issues come and resonate from in a way that's not alarming, right? So we sort of remove the stigma to have these conversations in a positive and productive way, so that once you sort of gain some of that understanding at its core, then you can sort of move away from defensiveness and say, oh, well, we're not racist, right? From that sort of mindset into oh, wait a minute, how do I take anti-racist action? How do I weave this into the fiber of my organization where it's not placed on one department, right? Or it's not placed in a particular space, or it's just the athletes who have to focus on this. How do we do everything from a social justice lens if that's something we're committed to as an organization?
Yeah, I really appreciate like hearing the common themes across all of the work that you guys are doing, because I hear like community coming up a lot. And in philanthropy, as we think about that type of work, it's about community. It's about really understanding what's going on the ground. And so with that comes a ton of different intersectionalities. So, race is the central of what our community, especially as we think about 2020, has experienced. But building upon that framework, there's so many different intersectionalities of what we could be addressing through the work that we do. And so I would love to hear from all of you of just how can philanthropy be used to promote like diversity, equity, inclusion, because those are very broad frameworks, but yet like we have really big impact in that.
I can jump in first here. I would say injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere, right? So I don't think we can have a conversation around social justice and limit it to just race, or limit it to just gender, right? Or sexual orientation, or whatever that topic might be, socioeconomic status, right? So at Rise, our specialty, right? Our expertise is race. So that's the lens that we start the conversation from. It is impossible for us to get through a conversation, right? And speak to someone. And Tiffany, I'll just use you as an example, right? Your gender is probably going to come into your experience. And the way we have conversations experientially, we absolutely don't want Tiffany to leave that aspect of her identity out. So as we think about making spaces more normalized for all of our identities, right? How do we have a conversation and speak from perhaps one that's minoritized, so that others can relate and understand, and then we can sort of promote this justice socially for every group, right? To make sure that the playing field is equal for everyone. So when we think about it in that way, I think intersectionality is inherent, and we sort of don't want to speak as experts in other spaces, right? So you sort of leave that space for others to talk about their own experience, but make sure that that you acknowledge all of the different parts of a person.
When I think about philanthropy in this specific area of our society and what they can be doing in the social justice conversation, I think it starts with not being afraid to interrogate your organization, right? Before you even step out and start to do the work, how are we honoring diversity, inclusion, social justice, and equity within the four walls of our organization? Are all of our leaders white men or white people? Has that been historic in our institute? Do we actually take funding away from other organizations that might be more centered in the community and able to support the communities we say we're here to help? That interrogation process is not going to be something the organization encourages you to do. No one's going to encourage you to do that. But I think that will unlock a new way of operating in the philanthropy space. Otherwise, I think there's an organic tie-in. Philanthropy, when I think of the industry and the folks doing the work in this space, there's usually an unapologetically mission-focused lens through which work is done. So I think that it's not being afraid to, or don't water that down. I think that we can get away from the mission when we start to do things that become mundane or typical, or we just do what everybody else is doing in this space, get creative with solutions. But I think it really starts with that taking a look at the inside. How are we operating in a way that brings equity to the forefront, not just for the work we do outside, but within our organizations, because I think then it's easier to be a reflection of the work that you say you want to complete.
Yeah, and I think to piggyback on both what Colin and Vincent have said, I've thought about this question. It's an interesting question, and I think the case that's worth noting most is the NFL's commitment to social justice. Now, understanding that there's a lot of perception differences, and all of that aside, 4 years ago, the NFL made a commitment, an $89 million commitment to social justice over the next 7 to 10 years. And that was player driven. Malcolm Jenkins, Anquan Bolden went there when it wasn't popular. They were risking their careers, frankly, to really push for this. And I think something that Colin had mentioned earlier, we found ourselves in a position having to educate them on what social justice was. So when the group of players went to the league, there was a 10-page memo that said, this is what criminal justice reform is, and these are some of the very specific issues that are happening. This is what education equity looks like. This is economic advancement, and really spelled it out for them to get them to understand how they needed to start viewing a lot of these issues that were impacting their players across the leagues and communities across the country. So when we look at the philanthropy they did, I don't think they always know how progressive the organizations that they really are supporting are. They're supporting organizations through that social justice fund that are addressing mass incarceration in Alabama. They're addressing really progressive organizations that are really moving the needle. And I think that it's been the biggest commitment to social justice ever. And I think that is worth noting. But I think what the key piece to that was that it was all player driven. And so these issues were player led, player experienced, and they came to the league very prepared and very educated on what they needed to ask for and what that call to action was going to be and how they were going to create these end results.
Yeah, and I really think that that's like such a critical transition into like this piece of sport, right? And so working with the Laureus Foundation, Nelson Mandela being our founding patron, sport has the power to change the world. It creates hope where there was once only despair. And so we constantly keep that in the back of our minds as we're doing this work. And so I would love to take a deeper dive and truly understand what role does sport actually play in promoting positive transformation in our communities.
I'm happy to jump on that one because I open workshops with that quote. I like to set the tone with that quote because I think that, again, I say power of sports like this, and I don't mean that to be minimizing, but I think that there's so much more to it. And the reason I believe that so powerfully is because Nelson Mandela believed it. And if he can say that with his place in our world history, we should feel a sense of responsibility working in sports. Especially those of us that have any tie to leadership. So to me, I think about our society, and I'm not going to get into, I'm just going to ask that everybody trust me when I say that we live in a society that is really segregated. It doesn't encourage us to have many interactions across difference. And when I talk to and coach CEOs about their experience across difference, and I ask about their first time, it's usually their sports team. And so to me, that is an indicator of that sports introduces us to different cultures. And I think the power that we've recognized in sports has been organic. And that's why I think there's so much more to be recognized once we start to do some of this stuff intentionally. So we've had interactions across difference that happen organically, but what if we were intentionally building, like Rise does, intentionally building experiences to educate and deepen that experience. So it's not just exposure, but now we're getting to understanding. And it's not just on the field, but now it's, understanding personal differences and lived experiences. And I think as we grow from that kind of grassroots, and again, being intentional, the power of sport, because of the position that we hold in our society, again, it's unlimited. But I do think that, to the point, our responsibility hasn't barely scratched the surface. We've kind of rested on the laurels of creating community, which we do organically, which is very valuable. I think there's so much more to unlock. That quote you mentioned is why I believe that so strongly.
I'm going to jump in. Interestingly enough, our sort of Rise intro video also uses that quote, right, from Nelson Mandela, right? So it clearly resonates strongly with a lot of folks. Like, it sort of, again, who's saying it sort of just contextualize it. Like, wow, like if Nelson Mandela is saying that, then it has to have some credence. But I want to use a quick anecdote to sort of highlight this point about why we use sports. So I'm from a first generation American, first generation college, low income New York City family, right? So for me, my experience has always looked at what does it take for someone from a background like mine, not exactly like not the exact same, but like mine, to sort of move up the change economic status, right, and sort of climb this ladder that we think of. And really, it was two ways. There was student athlete, right? So it was like this academic side, or is this athletic side? And my experience was the academic side. But I recognize that athletes also had this opportunity, right? This opportunity to engage with others, to get to college, et cetera. And what I found in my research was that folks did not want to talk about this concept of race when I brought it up from this academic lens, right? So Angela talked about, oh, some of the education inequities, right? So I was trying to really get folks to care about race and say, oh, look, it's not fair with the sort of immigrant lens to be in America, right, where people have these disadvantages. Let's talk about that. And it was like, I don't know. That topic isn't as juicy, right? And so I spent the beginning of my career trying to write about it from different lenses around education in schools, and folks just weren't really listening to it. Then I sort of shifted gears, helped my advisor with this piece that talked about the racial inequities in Division I college sports, right? So why is it that Black male student athletes are 2.5% of an entire campus, but when we look at basketball and football, they're 60 to 70% of the teams, right? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about their performance. And when I started the conversation with sports, hey, who's your favorite team? And then use that as a segue into race, right? Then people were intrigued, like, oh my goodness, why is that? Or let's talk about this, right? And that piece that we did, like after 2 days of releasing, like ESPN responded to us. We had like 300 national outlets that were saying, oh my goodness, study at University of Pennsylvania discovers this topic around race. And now people are talking about it, right? And for me, the hard part has always been getting people to start the conversation. If you can get them in the room, get their ears perked up a little bit, all right, then we can talk about it. But if you won't even join me in that discourse, then how do we sort of create change? How do we achieve social justice? And for me, I learned a while ago that sports creates this place that we can talk about difference in a way, right? If that person's willing to just give you a little bit of their ear and continue the dialogue. So I'll just use that anecdote to answer there.
And I know, Angela, I want you to answer this question, but I also want to pose another question because we're actually running low on time. And so I know there's a lot of conversation around athletes. Like, I'm based in New Orleans. I think about Malcolm Jenkins, being here in New Orleans. I think about Drew Holiday and him dedicating, his salary to supporting Black and Brown-led organizations. Teron Armstead opening up a facility to create more access to education. And then Swin Cash is like really promoting gender equality when we think about, women and girls in sports. So I'm just curious to hear more about the athletes and their voices in this movement, but also just speaking a little bit to the work that you're doing with the Players Coalition and through LaChica Sports. How do you find that that's making the most impact?
Sure, thank you. And I think that this answer can answer both questions. Some really specific examples that we've used with the athletes platform, there's no denying their platform and the connection with elected officials and holding them accountable. So I'll give you a couple of concrete examples. We work to consolidate efforts. So we have, again, athletes in 10 different professional sports represented, and then they come together by region or market based on what their passion points are. So for instance, in Orlando, we held a sheriff's forum 2 years ago now with Coach Stan Van Gundy, Quentin Richardson, Bo Outlaw, and Quan Bolden. And we had all of the candidates who were up for election there. We never get behind a candidate because we don't want to violate any C3 issues, but Because elected officials show up when athletes are asking them to show up for these forums. So we're able to put them on the spot, ask them very pointed questions with community members there. And at that forum, we ended up getting the sitting Sheriff John Mina, to commit to raising the age of arrest, juvenile arrest, from 6 years old to 14 years old. Now that's not a big win, but it's a little win. They were arresting 6-year-olds in Orlando. And so what that did is that those athletes being there held him accountable, and in a public forum, he committed to some policy change. The same thing in New Orleans. Demario Davis held a public defender forum, trying, a town hall to bring pressure on the city, putting more budget into public defender services. Devin McCourty, we worked 8 months on a campaign around education equity. And because he was who he was writing op-eds, we had him submit written testimonies, various different types of activations around education that ended up infusing $1.4 billion into the public school system in Massachusetts. So those efforts are wide sweeping and addressing, like I said, hundreds of thousands of community members. And, the players always say some of these groups are trying to get meetings with these officials for years. And then you call and you say, I got so-and-so who'd like a meeting with you. They're Johnny on the spot, and they're meeting and they're, listening. They know that those closed door meetings become public tweets or op-eds if we're not holding them accountable. So I think it's been, again, really intentional on how we've been able to work, but to see some of those legislative wins has been really rewarding, and just keeping the momentum going.
Yeah, so we have about 5 minutes here, and I want to bring it back to, why we're here. We're here to really share some golden nuggets with the students that are participating in today's session. So I guess, what actionable steps or what type of insights would you share with the students on our session today around, social justice and sports philanthropy?
I'll go ahead and jump in. First of all, I love that this is student focused. I think it's so important to really educate this next generation coming into our industry. But like Nicole had mentioned earlier, showing up, I think, is half the battle, but also understanding the power of your own platform when it comes to social justice within your communities. I know we say things like get out to vote a lot, understanding what down ballot vote is, but understanding really the power of that. The thing the example I think of most often while we've been educating this next generation of college athletes coming into Players Coalition is the Ahmaud Arbery murder. That went through 4 prosecutors before we ever saw a video. Those prosecutors are elected officials. Those prosecutors failed their community. Your vote matters, not just in those presidential elections. So I think once you really understand your individual platform, there's a lot of momentum that you could work towards. And then just showing up to informational things like this is so important. And these students right now are so fortunate to be able to engage in these small community forums, more so than I ever had a chance to coming up. So the more you can attend these types of symposiums and engage with actors in the area, I think the better off you are. Sorry, that was long-winded.
I don't think so at all. I could have kept listening, and I wanted to piggyback on it because you talked about the individual piece, and I think that is so important, both educating yourself and activating yourself. Like the voting thing is not something that you have to wait for permission to do. Like as soon as you're a voting age, you can educate yourself and get started and support others in doing the same, your friends, family, and others who may not be operating with that same agency. The other thing I would say is understand the systems around you. If sports is the industry you want to go into, pay attention to things like the research that Colin mentioned, where you've got 2.5% of Black men on campus, but 60-70% of Black athletes playing basketball. This is a system that's operating here. So, eventually coming into this industry, I want to encourage everybody to attempt to be change makers, but you can't change a system that you haven't taken the time to understand. So pay attention to the systems, look at the inputs and the outputs, look at the outcomes, and reimagine. Don't only imagine yourself in that system as it currently exists, but think about what you can come in and do that could effectively activate change, especially if it's moving in the direction of justice. When we talk about justice, Colin gave us a quick definition. This is essentially, there aren't demographic factors that lead to different outcomes solely because of those demographic factors, right? We got 2 minutes, so I'm not going to dig any more into that, but pay attention to the systems as well. Operate your individual, like Angela said, and then start to pay attention to the systems that you're wanting to break into.
Man, those are both of those were excellent. I will just say, sort of simply, know your why. Know your why. I think one of the things I talk about when I talk about race, right? Because that's what I'm passionate about. That's what I spent years studying. Is that means something to me and it's personal to my experience. But I'm not going to expect everyone to have that same passion about race. But find some issue of public concern. Find something, right, in society that you genuinely care about, that you want to see a sort of change in, or you want to affect change in that way, and then do the work to educate yourself, right? Do that to figure out what's going on. Vincent talked about these systems, understand that. But in addition to educating yourself, empower yourself, right? Develop the skills, the tools, the resources, the networks, right, of people to reach out to when you want to create change and be able to make some of those phone calls yourselves, because you may not be able to call politicians, right? But you might have people at organizations who can lean on their networks as well, right? So really just thinking about what your why is, think about what you want to change, and then be intentional about that, and think about what skills you need to develop, the relationships to really create that change that you want to see, because all of you are future leaders. I'm really looking forward to seeing what it is that you do and what those action steps that you take are.
Well, I think we're out of time, but Angela, Colin, Vince, thank you so much for all the insights that you guys shared today. And also thank you to the students that are tuning in and listening to what we had to share. This is a collective effort. It's not gonna be addressed tomorrow. It's not gonna be addressed in 5 years. It's gonna take time to unpack, generations and years of what we are experiencing. So I'll go ahead and kick it back to Champions for Philanthropy, and just want to thank everybody again.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, Angela, Colin, and Vincent, for that engaging conversation. We appreciate you guys. Next, we'll move into our mini sessions. First will be a conversation on social entrepreneurship, followed by a discussion about using name, image, and likeness for fundraising. All right, so we'll bring Sarah onto the screen, followed by Danielle Berman.
Right. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Eddy. I'm a student at St. John's University, and I'm currently an intern for Champions for Philanthropy. I'm excited to introduce Danielle Berman to lead our social entrepreneurship session. Hi, Danielle.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks so much. Thank you guys all for having me. Thanks to Alésha and Michelle for having me here. And thanks, excited to chat with you.
Great. Would you mind starting off by introducing yourself to the audience and kind of explaining what your company does?
Absolutely. So I am the founder of Tackle What's Next, and we work with athletes to help them prepare for life after sports. We specifically help them create impact in life after sports and really find their purpose.
Awesome. So for those in the audience who don't know, can you define social entrepreneurship in your own words?
Yeah, absolutely. So social entrepreneurship is really about creating businesses around solutions to make the world better. So some people call it social enterprise, some call it social business, but really working to make a difference in society through a sustainable business idea. That's how I would define it.
Okay, so kind of building off that definition, what inspired you to kind of start your company?
Yeah, so I say this a lot, but I really didn't think I would ever start my own company. This is definitely not what I expected, but I really relate with that idea behind social entrepreneurship. I fell in love with the idea of what this business does. I truly believe, just as we've heard in the past conversations, that athletes really have such important platforms that they can use to make the world better. And we can give them these tools to have them create that impact that they want to see. So I was really just passionate about the idea. I worked on it, and then creating a business around it became kind of the natural next step.
So in your opinion, how do you think social entrepreneurship fits into the sports industry?
Oh, I think it really fits perfectly. We just heard a on that panel the quote of Nelson Mandela, right? Sport has the power to change the world. And I think a lot of times we think about that from like a philanthropy sense, right? Like a charity sense. But social entrepreneurs are really creating sustainable businesses using sport as a model, right? Using sports partnerships, sponsorships, but also using sport as kind of the tool to get people in the door. So we've seen now over the last year that making an impact is actually good for business. People are starting to notice that, put that into their plans, put that into their revenue models. And I think now it's important to look at each aspect of the sports industry to see how can we apply that. So thinking about like, can sports tech companies start to look at how can they close the digital divide in our communities? Or maybe instead of just kind of sponsoring a sports team or partnering with an athlete for that marketing power, like how do you add training and resources to families that don't have Wi-Fi setups or don't understand technology, maybe older Americans? Can pro sports teams start to invest in youth sports programming and helping kids that can't afford these high sports fees to participate? But obviously, given my background and what I do, I really feel like the biggest fit in the sports industry is with athletes. We just saw this week that 4 Olympians came together to found together, Sue Bird, Alex Morgan, Simone Manuel, and Chloe Kim, right, to elevate women's voices in sports and the coverage of women's sports. So they saw a problem and now they're investing in the solution. So I think athletes have a huge opportunity to really capitalize on that.
Awesome. So what do you think are some things that hold entrepreneurs or athletes back from reaching their full potential?
As many of the consultants and entrepreneurs know on the call here, it is definitely not an easy road, but sometimes the biggest obstacle is just ourselves. It's comparing ourselves to others, trying to be something else, right? Something that we're not. We heard from Nicole earlier. She talked about like really finding things that align with you or being intentional. Like you have to be yourself. You can't compare yourself to other people. And you can't just copy what somebody else does. You have to really find how you fit into the picture. So a lot of times I have to remind myself, like, there's no playbook, right? There's no cheat sheet that I can follow and say, okay, here's how I do it. It's got to be in my own way, in my own time. And I think the other piece of that is you can't do it by yourself. So I think a lot of times we try and do it all. We're the entrepreneur, we're the founder, we have to do it. You need to surround yourself with that team that can help make it happen.
So kind of elaborating off of that, saying like you can't do it by yourself, what would you say is your company's like core mission?
Yeah, so we really try to be that team for athletes, right? We want to help them build themselves into their next plan. So I think a lot of times athletes feel like they might not know what's next. And if they do, they don't know how to get there. So we try and give them those tools. But at the same time, we also want them to understand the power and impact that they actually can make, the skills that they've learned and how valuable they are, and just really understand their own strength and the opportunity they have to control their next step and really build themselves into it, prioritize them, not necessarily their athletic ability.
Great. So what do you think the future of social entrepreneurship looks like in kind of a post-COVID world?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, trends are really shifting. Public opinion's really changed that social impact is important to the majority of people. People want to see how we're going to make the world better. And so I think, like I said, athletes are going to continue to lead the way in those sustainable responsibility partnerships and social responsibility, sponsorships, their endorsements, et cetera. But I really think for everyone here on the call, all the students that are here today, like you're the next generation of our leaders in the sports industry and beyond. And I think people think entrepreneurship is always about building their own business or their own company or their own nonprofit. It doesn't have to be that big of a shift. It could be a new campaign that you're developing at your company, right? A new club at your school that you want to work towards and solve a problem, or even creating a new idea within a company or an organization you already work for. So I think it's a lot of times just being creative and really focusing on the idea and how you are uniquely fit to solve or invest yourself into the solution. So if it truly matters to you, just like we heard earlier, if it really aligns with you, you can intentionally create a part of the solution if you really believe in it and want to work for it.
Awesome. So kind of backpedaling a little bit, how did you see social entrepreneurship change in response to COVID? And do you think like these changes are going to be permanent?
I think some of them will, definitely. I think people started to realize that it's not just enough to kind of get through the day and make some money at the end of the day. Like there has to be something you're doing for other people. And businesses really started to learn okay, it's not just enough to please our shareholders and just to kind of create buzz and put out commercials and say, hey, we hope you're doing okay. We actually have to invest in the communities and into our customers. And I think that is the idea behind social business is, yes, you're making money, right? Yes, you're raising money because social businesses can also be nonprofits. But the idea is that at the end of the day, you are also improving the world around you. So I really do think, as devastating as this past year has been, there have been a lot of really great learning opportunities for us to kind of come in and say, all right, now we need to evaluate how are we also going to be helping others? How is the work we're doing going to contribute and benefit our world and leave it better than we found it? So I think that will stay. And I really hope that companies that haven't started to look that way really start to. And I'm glad to see the numbers are kind of coming behind that to show people care and they want to buy and invest in companies that are focusing on that.
Great. And to close, as college students, how can people kind of get their start in social entrepreneurship? Like, what would you recommend?
Yeah, I would recommend definitely looking at companies that you think are doing a great job or creating something different. Just like Nicole said, find something that aligns with you, but also get that experience. I think everybody's mentioned like the hard work, but you really don't know until you get out there and do it. So I recommend volunteering, interning, doing all of these things just to get your feet wet, because you'll learn what you like, you'll learn what you don't like, and you'll kind of see if it's the right fit for you. But you really have to understand yourself and your unique ads and values and interests. Like your dive into social entrepreneurship may be different than how I got into it or how you're going to get into it, Sarah. So everyone's going to have a unique kind of aspect or angle.
We're excited to get started with our next session here. So Daniel will be brought up here and he'll introduce our next panelist.
Thank you, Sarah and Danielle. That was a great session. My name is Daniel Thorpe, and I'm currently an intern for Champions for Philanthropy. I'm also a student at UC Berkeley and Division I basketball player, so I'm especially excited for this conversation on NIL and fundraising. I'd like to welcome Lyle Adams to lead the session. Thank you for joining us, Lyle.
Daniel, thank you for having me today, and thank you for the Champions of Philanthropy for the invitation. I'm excited to be here.
Fantastic. It's great to have you here. Can you give the audience a brief introduction of yourself?
My name is Lyle Adams. I'm a former student athlete, graduated from Wake Forest University, and now I'm the CEO of SPRY. SPRY is a platform designed to help student athletes and collegiate athletic departments navigate the challenges that will ultimately arise when NIL becomes law later this summer.
Okay. Well, speaking on SPRY, what about your background as a student athlete led you to become the founder of SPRY?
College athletics had a really positive impact on my life. As I mentioned, I played soccer at Wake Forest, and many of the things I learned in college were very transferable to the workplace, like being on time, like managing your course load, being a great teammate. When Senate Bill 206 passed in California, I immediately thought this was a wonderful opportunity for many student athletes. So looking at myself, I could have done camps and clinics in my hometown to make a little money on the side. However, though, when I further read the legislation, I read there were some potential pitfalls around taxes and financial aid, and my goal was to build a platform to help student athletes navigate some of these challenges.
What stood out to you about deficiencies in the NIL process?
Every rule change has positives and negatives, if you want to put it that way. I think allowing student athletes to monetize from their name, image, and likeness is a wonderful opportunity for many, and I'm very happy they will have that ability too. But as I previously alluded to, how do student athletes pay taxes? Unfortunately, 18-year-old Lyle wasn't very savvy on taxes, and per the legislation, student athletes will be responsible for paying taxes. So for me, I wanted to pay it forward, you could say, and build a system that could educate student athletes on how to manage their business affairs, whether it's taxes, how to create a company, how to navigate being their own business owner at 18, 19 in college when there's so much other things going on, as well as your school and classwork.
Great. Based on your experience as an athlete, or your experience with clients at SPRY, do you believe student athletes understand the social impact they can make by using their NIL?
Absolutely. I was fortunate enough to be a member of a national championship team in college, and we could see the impact we would have in the local community in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Or summer camps in the summer at Winston were attended by a ton of little kids in the neighborhood or from the North Carolina area, and you could see the positive impact we had on them. Taking it a step further is looking at the events of last summer or after the unfortunate death of George Floyd. You could see the power that athletes, professional or collegiate, could have on pushing for change in the local communities or in the national stage. So I think student athletes are definitely aware of all the benefits that can come from using their voice to push for change.
What type of restrictions, if any, do you believe should be in place in regards to student athlete fundraising?
It's a great question. It's a slippery one that, like, I would say, I'll put it this way. So there's nothing stopping me from right now going to a crowdfunding platform and making a donation every single day. So, you're going to have to be able to mitigate those bad actors who want to, promote a play model, where the athlete now is, I'm going to endorse your campaign just so you can go to school here. That will ultimately, deter the good intentions of all these social justice campaigns and fundraising that all the athletes want to do. So obviously we'll take some buy-in from the schools, hopefully the NCAA or the governing bodies, but I think there are a lot of smart people out there who can ultimately create a solution that benefits everyone.
That's a great point. Where do you see the NIL impacting athletes in a negative way, and how could that be changed?
Negative way, I just think it's unintended. I don't think it's going to be negative, because allowing athletes to make money from their NIL is a very positive thing. I think some of the negative or unintended consequences might be around how to pay your taxes. Are athletes going to proactively save 30% of these NIL earnings now to pay taxes on their own? Is something that just worries me. At the same time, for those students who are on need-based financial aid, for example, you could make the argument that the more money you make from NIL, it could ultimately hurt your government package or your need-based aid, which many might not be aware of. So I would hate for a circumstance to happen where a student athlete now does a local car wash, and also they might lose some scholarship money at the following year. That's an unintended consequence that I think, hopefully SPRY is trying to address and solve. And those were the things that initially attracted us to the problem. It's how do you provide student athletes with the skills and tool sets necessary to be successful on their own?
Your platform, SPRY, is largely described as a tech platform, but how much of your process with student athletes is educational?
Over half of it. I think education is key in any new situation or rule change. There's going to be so many different things now student athlete has to educate themselves on. How to build their brand, how to sign contracts, why a waiver or liability insurance is important now if you're running your own camp, right? What's the pros and cons of signing exclusive deals versus non-exclusive deals? So I think providing an education framework for student athletes is massively important, so they can now go into these opportunities educated and informed to somewhat weed out bad actors who might want to take advantage of them at the end of the day.
With the new NCAA ruling, how do you see the landscape of college athletics changing?
College athletics it's going to change. What those changes look like, I don't know, but all change for me is positive. I'm an optimist. So I think things will look drastically different when NIL first passes as it looks in 2023 or 2024. But some of the changes that will happen, I think, will benefit, the large Power 5 institutions or some of the smaller resource institutions, the D3 and D2 and D3 levels.
When do you see these legislative changes being implemented for teams?
That's a great question for a longer conversation. Group licensing is obviously a hot button topic, and I think hopefully the NCAA and the federal government will be able to chime in and reach a solution that benefits everyone. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know how they go about it, but I'm hoping they reach a resolution sooner than later.
Okay. And we have a little more time, so if there's any questions, we have about 2 more minutes remaining. So do you have any parting points that you'd like to make?
I would just say first, with all the student athletes in the audience, first of all, thank you for attending. Next thing, I ask you to educate yourselves as you get, as NIL comes around the corner. At the end of the day, this is a wonderful opportunity for you to provide for your family, to run a camp, to send money back home, to pay off some student loans, to save for the future. but make sure you're signing and doing things that are according to the law and rules, right? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to lose your eligibility, but you don't want to also put yourself in a compromising position, whether it's an illegal or ethical stance. So education is just so important here. And I ask that you read the rules, you take care of yourselves at the end of the day to make sure that you put yourself in the best position to be successful in the future.
Can you let the audience know how athletes use your service?
But right now, you can reach out to, directly at SPRY, contact@sprypayments.com, or reach out to your athletic department. Right now, we're in beta testing with 4 athletic departments right now, hopefully adding more students.
I'd like to hand it off to Jamie now to introduce the next panel.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jamie Obamy. I'm the marketing manager at Champions for Philanthropy. I am especially excited to be a part of this conversation as I recently finished graduate school and entered the sport philanthropy world full time. I want to welcome 3 amazing panelists to share how they got to this space. I will welcome Rochelle Patel, Melissa Schiller, and Kara Rooney for this discussion. Hello, everyone. How are you?
I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I want to start off, you 3 are some impressive women in the sport philanthropy space. I want to start off by having you each provide a little background on who you are and what you do. How about
I'll kick us off. Sorry. All right. Okay. So hello, my name is Kara Rooney, and I am the Senior Manager of Community Relations with the Los Angeles Lakers. Our community relations team is part of the philanthropic arm of the organization alongside the Lakers Youth Foundation. So we oversee and implement all of our community engagement programs, which include everything from youth to education, military, social justice, and beyond, plus any in-game activations and community player appearances. So I am Los Angeles born and raised, attended UC Irvine for college, and have a pretty strong sports philanthropy background. So I'm very excited to be here.
I can jump in next. I'm Melissa Schiller, Director of Community Relations for the NFL. So similar in a way to what Kara does, but at the league level and with football. So I work on the national level with our nonprofit partners and lead our sport philanthropy work. I work very closely with our 32 NFL teams, a lot of the same topics that Kara talked about and league initiatives, as well as a lot of our tentpole event planning. So a lot of my job is also kind of what we do around impact around the Super Bowl and the NFL draft and those topics. So looking forward to our conversation today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rochelle Patel. I'm Director of Marketing and Partnerships for Laureus Sport for Good Foundation. Slightly on the other side of things, we are a national nonprofit foundation. We fund organizations that use sport to help youth in underserved communities. So work with grassroots nonprofits that are doing amazing work using sport as a tool for social change across the country. And we're actually part of a global network of organizations that are doing that at an international level. But lucky to work closely with athletes and teams and leagues, including for the team and leagues that are represented here, to really help impact change through sport.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to having you all share more about your stories. I want to start out by saying, if I've learned anything about the sports industry, it's that there are a million ways to get into it. Did you all always plan to work in sports or in philanthropy, or even a combination of the two?
I did not, personally. I actually studied musical theater and education in college. Didn't really see that in my future. Had always grown up playing sports, and my dad was a high school football coach and athletic director. So I was always around sports, but just never really considered myself an athlete. I was a dancer and a performer. So it was not really something that I saw for myself. And I went to school for a teaching credential thinking that that was what I was going to do, but was ultimately propelled in a different direction. And when it came down to making a decision about what I actually wanted to do, really the thing that that got me was both the positive impact in other people's lives that I wanted to have, and then sports. You know, it kind of through osmosis had it affected me greatly all through my life. And I saw the impact that sports can bring, both from a player, coaching, fan level, and the ability to put those two things together. Once I found that that was an actual thing that I could do, I haven't looked back.
Yeah, similarly, I actually didn't know this was a career path when I was in college. I was an athlete, well, you could call it an athlete, growing up until about age 14. But sports, I think, did shape a lot of my early years. I wasn't so great as I moved on to the later years of high school and college, but it was always a part of my life. I was a huge fan. I grew up in Philadelphia, so Philadelphia is just a crazy sports town, and I loved it. I loved everything about sport. I didn't really know the careers that existed within sport. And when I was in college, I did a lot of volunteering. I did a lot of work with youth and different nonprofits. I went to Penn State, so a lot of things around the State College area. And while I was there, that was on my resume, and I won't go too deep into it, but the long story short was I was studying communications, and I actually applied for a PR internship at the NFL. Didn't really know much about it. They emailed me back a few weeks later and said, you didn't get it, wasn't surprised. And then about a month later, I got a call and more or less said, hey, we have an internship in community relations. We didn't actually open it to the public because we didn't think we were going to have it. It looks like you have a lot of volunteering and nonprofit work on your resume. Would you be interested? And I think I literally said, like, what does that mean? Like, I just had no idea what that was. They told me a little bit about it. I said, this sounds incredible and kind of combines the two worlds that I love so much. And luckily enough, I was able to get the internship and learned a lot that summer. And it really kind of drove the rest of my career from there.
Great. Yeah. So for me, sports have always played a huge part of my life. Similar to Melissa, I was an athlete growing up and played all sports, come from a family of athletes. My dad played in college. And so it was always a huge part of who I was. And as I got older, I never saw it as a career. Honestly, it was just this thing I enjoyed doing and loved being a part of, loved watching. I'm from Clemson, South Carolina, so I was a huge football fan growing up, played basketball, all the sports. And then when I started figuring out what I wanted to do for a career, I was really interested in philanthropy. I always knew I wanted to make an impact in that space. And I actually first started working right out of college at the British consulate and working through their cultural relations arm. And I kind of just happened to, I say I stumbled into it, but I think the key thing is that I followed what I was passionate about. And so I think that's something, right away to say to any of the students listening, you can land in a million places your first job out of college. Like, you're just hoping to get something. You're just hoping someone will, give you a chance. You don't have any experience. You might've had a few internships. And that's what I did. And I loved that job. But when I was there, they happened to be working on a program using soccer with the Premier League to help impact youth in countries across the country, and we're bringing it to the US. And that wasn't technically my job, but I raised my hand. I said, this is a project I'm super passionate about. I would love to be a part of it. Is there some way I could play a role in it? And I was just, like the assistant, just, taking notes of the meetings, nothing that was, necessarily driving that initiative forward. But through that, I got connected with the Laureus Foundation because it opened up this entire world of sport for development. And I realized this is where I want to be. And it was through just jumping at a project that I happened to come across that I was able to find my way into sports philanthropy and really find a home in this space.
Amazing. So each of you has spoken about, not necessarily planning to end up where you are now. As we speak to college students, would you be able to talk about anything specific in terms of resources or opportunities that your universities offer, whether you use them or utilize them or not, that help set you up for this current role, or could help set up current college students for these types of roles?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, my major had absolutely nothing to do with this path. So I honestly don't remember if there were things that were specifically set up for this, like internships were not even on my radar at that time. But I will say that, like, the one thing that I can say I carry with me every single day that I learned from college, and specifically my theater background, is the ability to be flexible regularly. If you're on stage, you're going to be have to be prepared for anything to happen. And when something does go awry, you got to think creatively and be able to move on as if nothing is going wrong, which I bring with me to every single event or program or whatever it may be that we run. So I'd say that's the biggest takeaway I had.
Yeah, for me, I did, when I was in my senior year at Penn State, they did offer, I think the sporting kind of business world was picking up a little bit there. They did offer a few courses that I took that really introduced me to the business of sport. So I know that that's offered at a number of universities now, even if you want to go into sport philanthropy or you want to go into sport marketing or some other area within sport, understanding the business of sport as a whole is extremely important. And I'm realizing that more and more as I'm kind of continuing in my career, because how I think of sport philanthropy at the league level, at the NFL, it's only successful if you understand the assets and all of the things you can utilize to make what you want to have happen. So I just say, as you're in college, learning as much as possible is extremely important. I know for Penn State specifically, they have like a sports business club. There's a lot of ways to kind of interact with alumni through that club. So just exploring what's out there at your own school is really important. And networking. I mean, networking is huge. I have a lot of people, I was looking at the participant list, and people I've talked to are in this, are on this Zoom right now. Like just reach out to people. Not everyone will answer every time, but if you continue to reach out to people, people will answer, and starting that conversation, learning about all of the parts of the business will really set you up for success.
Yeah, so I went to Berman University, which is a small liberal arts school in Greenville, South Carolina. And I think kind of similar to Kara, I definitely did not think that I was going to be in sports philanthropy and pursuing that specifically. But what I will say, and kind of like to Melissa's point, is just taking advantage of all the assets that were provided. So I think if you're a student, you're already way far ahead of me, the fact that you're on this webinar and, already thinking specifically about the career that you're going to be in. So that's amazing. But knowing that, use your career service offices, use the internship opportunities. I mean, one thing that I did that I think is maybe not directly linked, but to me, it has landed me where I am, was studying abroad. I studied abroad in Edinburgh, Scotland. I interned for Scottish Parliament, and that really opened up my eyes to like international development in that whole world, which is kind of what fueled me to the British consulate and then to sport. So I feel like if you are following your passions, you're going to be able to land in places that will open doors, but you have to be proactive. So you have to take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to you. And also there are so many resources at a college level that I think most students aren't even aware of. And so definitely ask for those, where they exist, how they can be tapped into, and don't be afraid to, try, I think a lot of people are saying, well, this will maybe like have me miss more parties, or I won't be able to, do the other college experience stuff, but trust me, you can do it all. You can balance it. And so I would just say, make sure that you take advantage of some of those out of the box opportunities. And then for me with sport, I was always doing intramurals. I was doing club soccer, and so many of those connections actually, like, they've landed in amazing places. And so make sure you keep in touch with those connections that you make through those clubs and activities.
I have one more thing to add here quickly that I didn't mention. One of the reasons I think I got the internship at the NFL that I did was through, I was volunteering for a nonprofit at the time, and the beneficiary of the nonprofit was an orphanage in Zambia. And this seems random, but it's not. I did that. It was great. When I was interviewing at the NFL, I was talking with the guy that was interviewing me, and he literally had just came back from the Peace Corps in Zambia. And I only say that because you never know what experience will lead you to the next thing. So even if it's not sport related, even if it's not philanthropy related, use everything available to you to gain those experiences, because you never know what talking point is going to be that connection factor for you.
Amazing. Thank you, guys. So between the three of you, we do have a great variety as you represent a team, a league, and a nonprofit foundation. Can you discuss the difference between those types of organizations for the audience?
Sure. So for me, I'm on the team side, obviously. What drew me to the team side of things was specific to Los Angeles. I really enjoyed that the Lakers are this team that everyone in Los Angeles knows, right? And I grew up in Los Angeles. So knowing that I could impact on a grand level through this specific team and specifically in my city was very important to me and very enticing for me. And beyond that, I think in the community relations side of a team, the programming is the focus for me. So I came from a small nonprofit. I worked for a nonprofit called the Count on Me Family Foundation, which had been created originally by Jim Mora, who was UCLA's head football coach and a former NFL coach. But we were very focused in fundraising, because as a small nonprofit, you have to be in order to keep up. And even though I did serve there as the program director for a period of time, so much of it was so small and hands-on that we all were doing fundraising a lot. And to be able to go to the team side where I am focused on actual programming and community outreach and making impact was very enticing for me.
Yeah, a little bit. So from the league perspective, some similarities, of course. I think at the league level, we're in New York City. We're a little bit more kind of corporate and less grassroots. I think that's the best way to kind of differentiate. We don't have the weekly events that teams do. We don't have kind of that touch point directly with players all the time. We spend a lot of our time and energy around, I would say, 3 major things. One is planning for our big events and how we make an impact in those cities. So at the Super Bowl, this year was an anomaly, but normally we'd host 40 plus events leading up to the Super Bowl, all tied to community, and they would all kind of thread in some way together to leave an impact. So we do that around the Super Bowl, around the draft, around the NFL Pro Bowl, even now our NFL kickoff week. So kind of that event angle. Second, we work with our national nonprofit partners. So a lot of the work we do with these nonprofit partners are not grassroots on the ground. They're really at the national level, working with, for instance, an American Cancer Society and providing millions of dollars in funding to do cancer screenings in underserved communities across the U.S. So kind of this broader scale approach. And then 3, it's working with our 32 clubs. So it's really working with the clubs, sharing best practices across the league, providing kind of strategic direction of where we're heading and where our marketing is heading, and how clubs can get there. One of the other things I was just going to mention is the kind of split resources between players and league initiatives. And I think from a league level, it actually is one of our strategic priorities right now is players are our partners. So how we support our players in what they want to do. One of the things you'll see that came to life over the last few years and will continue to grow is our My Cause, My Cleats initiative. It's not just about what the league cares about, it's also about what our players care about. How can we continue to lift the voices of our players through marketing and other assets and support what they care about most. So I think it's a good balance for us and something that we're continuing to lean on in bigger ways as for the years to come.
Yeah, so from the Laureus Foundation, I think we are super unique in that we are a nonprofit organization, but we're also an intermediary. So we're actively making grants to these nonprofits across the country. We're also actively looking for partners to help us and come alongside us to do that work. I think, for me, what it comes down to is just that impact mission-driven work that we do. And so everything we do is done with an eye of improving the lives of youth and uniting communities through the power of sport. What I really enjoy about working at an organization like Laureus is that we don't do that prescriptively. We do that through empowering local organizations that are already doing amazing work and saying, how can we help you along in that journey? And so I think what's so nice is that it allows us to be sport agnostic. We can work with the Lakers, we can work with the NFL, we can work with teams all over. It allows us to be, male and female, disability, all types of levels of ability, those who are looking to become, the best in their sport and those who are just looking to develop their life skills. And so working at this intersection of sport and philanthropy gives us the flexibility to support organizations that are just doing the best work to develop youth into being their best selves. And we just know that sport is one of the avenues that gets kids excited and gets kids engaged, along with arts. So Kara, it's great you're a performer. That's a huge avenue as well. And we support a lot of dance and yoga programs. And so for us, it's, what can we do to empower organizations that are doing work locally? And then what can we do to help lift the sector overall? We call this sector sports-based youth development. When I first started at Laureus, it wasn't super well known, but I think given everything that's happened over the past couple of years, people are starting to recognize sport isn't just this fun thing that makes you feel good. It develops your skills. When it's used intentionally, it can break down barriers and it can create positive relationships. And so being in a space that's our goal, that's our focus, it allows to feel like, every day you're going in, you're making an impact that's directly going to impact the youth that these organizations are serving. And it's been an awesome journey to kind of see how that's changed and shifted over the last couple of years, but also how we can work with amazing partners who are doing similar work throughout the country.
Awesome. So all of you have alluded to the fact that sport adds a fun and exciting element to philanthropy. Kara, specifically, the Lakers are coming off of a championship and have acquired some huge players in the last couple of years in LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and Champions for Philanthropy client Markieff Morris. How do those types of events affect the impact that you're able to make?
Yeah, absolutely. I think on the most tangible level, there's different special programs that we get to do when we're part of the finals. We got to make a special maker space at one of our local Boys and Girls Club in conjunction with NBA Cares, simply because we made it to the finals. So there's a lot of those type projects that we get to do because of it. But thinking more grandly, anytime you put positive spotlight on an organization, your reach will grow. And that is wonderful for the community. We're building a bigger fan base. We're already running so many programs, and those programs even gain extra clout because of a championship or because the Lakers are being talked about in such a huge way. And to put it simply, when eyes are on you, people can see what you're doing. There's not always necessarily a focus on the community, but when we're getting a ton of broadcast games, and especially at a time like right now, media is looking for interesting community stories. So a lot of our programs that wouldn't necessarily get that type of clout are getting even more interest because they're being broadcast, which is wonderful. I think on a corporate partner level, more corporate partners who are always, pretty heavily involved in our community projects as well, want to be a part of a championship team, and that just ends up giving us more money and more availability to do things in the community. And I think, from the community standpoint, or I guess really any standpoint, it's a good thing to win the championship. I think it can only be positive for the work and the reach that we have.
Amazing. Melissa and Rochelle, opening it up to you, what types of events for your organizations have the biggest impact?
Yeah, for me, I talked about it a little bit, but the Super Bowl is a big driver every year. We, as a league, we start working with the Super Bowl cities. There's organizing committees in each of those markets about 5 years probably prior to the Super Bowl happening. So there's a lot of work that goes into a Super Bowl. From an economic standpoint, there's a lot of benefits, obviously, bringing people to the town and creating jobs. But from a pure community and legacy standpoint, the NFL Foundation gives an $1 million grant to the community, and it's matched by the host committee. And they have to match it at $1 million or more. So that's $2 million to start. And they create, the organizing committee creates a type of legacy program. It could be a grant program. It can be a project-based program. There's so many pieces to it. But that's $2 million base, which obviously helps that local community. A few years in a row, we were upwards of $8 million in those communities. So these huge, large-scale events really do drive community impact. And then in addition to that, we come in and do 40 plus events leading up to the Super Bowl and the week of the Super Bowl, engaging the community. So you have the kind of long lasting impact side of it and also the community engagement side of it, which our team works on. So large scale events are extremely important and a big part of my role at the NFL.
Yeah, I think kind of unfortunately for us, it tends to be those negative events that have the biggest impact on the work that we do, because we're working in some of the lowest income communities, some of the most underserved populations. So when something like COVID happens, it's 10 times worse in those communities. When all the issues of racism that aren't new to last year, but when they get more highlighted, it becomes, 10 times more extreme in those communities. When you look at things like school strikes, when teachers go on strikes, that's where a lot of these kids are before they go to the program. And so that affects it. And so in New Orleans, Hurricane Katrina, those national disasters. And so I think, that's when we kind of have to go to work even harder to ensure that it's important that these kids have these safe places to play and to connect, but do they have food? Do they have access to Wi-Fi? How are they getting through their days to day? And so I think for, Laureus, we're just the conduit, right, to help the organizations that are out there in the trenches. But for us, we know, when some of those moments happen, we have to be on high alert, to be responsive, to say, what are those needs that we can meet right now? What can we do to help you make your job easier? And that's, really what I think for our work in the sport for good space and sport for development space, we have to keep our ear to what are these events that are happening with the economy, with the government, that will also affect where these kids are trying to work and play.
Great. So as Rochelle touched on, this last year has impacted pretty much every organization. Kara and Melissa, would you mind touching on, how they specifically affected your organization?
Sure. Yeah. Obviously, right. It's impacted in so many ways. There's been a shift that I think will never go away, and beyond the physical restraints of, working from home and that type of thing. But I've personally been very impressed with how our upper management has continually approached everything over this past year. And, interdepartmentally as well. It's been such a collaborative effort with everyone having to ask, how do we help? How do we make an impact? How do we stand as an anti-racist organization? How do we transition our current programs to virtual? It's been a very, wide range of questions we've had to ask ourselves and solutions that we've had to come up with. But I'm very proud of how the Lakers as an organization, and I'm talking top down and beyond, but I've seen a lot of pieces put into place for substantial and long-term impact, both within the organization with employee resource groups and task force and all the above, but also outside, and impact that will eventually impact the community.
Yeah, a lot of similar thoughts to kind of what Kara mentioned. I think for us, kind of looking at two different things here, right? Looking at COVID and how that's impacted us, and then looking at the spotlight that's been shown on all of the racial injustice in our country. And these issues are not new, but the spotlight definitely has helped our organization. I'd say a little bit more from an internal perspective. I've seen some really good progress and movement over the last 6 to 8 months that I had not seen years prior. So there's a lot of work to be done at the NFL, but it has definitely been a year of growth and progress for us. For COVID specifically, I think, a lot of our work is in-person events around the Super Bowl, around all of the major things that we do. And a lot of our grant programs through our nonprofits are in person. So learning how to shift that virtually obviously took some time. But, I think the biggest thing is kind of how Kara started the day here, like being flexible, learning how to adapt is so key. And being open to innovation and learning new ways to do what you do in bigger and better ways.
Great. We have just a couple of
that one in particular about the COVID, but I know we're running out of time, and I just maybe wanted to give a thought on for the students who are listening as to what is it that they can do right now to help enter into this sports philanthropy space. And I would just encourage them to find the local leaders in their community, wherever they are right now, who are making an impact on the lives of youth. Because I think at the end of the day, sports philanthropy doesn't mean you have to be at a sports program, right? That's what Laureus does. We fully believe in that tool and that power, but we work with so many athletes and you guys, the leagues and the teams, who are doing that through political actions, who are doing that through various social justice work, who are doing that through gender initiatives. And so I think it's understanding who are the local leaders that are making an impact, who have the organizations that are reaching kids where they are, right? They don't have to go somewhere else, or they're reaching them where they are. And when it comes to then, you're in a position of power where you can make an impact, you'll know where to direct that. Because I think at the end of the day, that's the end result. So whether you're starting from, you know, the league, the team, the player, a foundation, you want that to be able to reach that kid in that community. And so if you can have that lifeline and that connection to a community, it'll just make you so much more powerful trying to get into sports philanthropy when you can talk about it at a personal level and know, you know, personally, you've seen the impact, you've connected with those leaders, and you understand also their challenges. So when you're trying to represent them to say, you know, there's an opportunity, is this a good fit? You can also understand, will this create more work for them? Does this match with the goals that they're trying to achieve? And so, you know, there's never too young of an age to start connecting with champions and heroes that are doing the work locally in their own community.
Amazing. I also wanted to give you each an opportunity to share what initiative you're most proud of, whether it's in your current role as a volunteer, as an intern coming through, just what sport philanthropy initiative has given you the most joy?
Sure. This is a very hard question for me. I have so many programs that I'm like, are my babies. So you've given me a tough task narrowing it down, but I think the one that feels resonant right now is our Building Bridges with Basketball program. And this is a program that we invite LAPD officers, an older youth group, as well as current Laker players and former players, and just have an open dialogue conversation about different topics that are happening today. And I didn't create this program. This is a long-standing program within the Lakers, but to be a part of something so impactful that is only going to grow, and you can see the impact further down the line so many years from now, is really exciting to me. And it's all focused around basketball. It's just the perfect sports platform to have these people come together to talk and then actually play basketball together, where it's an open court and everything is equal, is really special and something I'm very proud of.
We're running out of time here, so I'll make mine quick, but a lot of initiatives I'm very proud of, but the one thing I'd say that brings me the most joy is growing our Walter Payton NFL Man of the Year award. It's our award that is focused on a player that does awesome work on off the field, as well as excellent, football on the field. And it's been kind of my baby over the last 9 years, and being able to share those player stories in a bigger way every single year, and being able to, on top of the award, they also get a donation to their charity that's pretty substantial. So continuing to grow the impact through our players and through the work that they care about is really key. So definitely probably the thing that brings me the most joy.
Yeah, and similarly, I know we're over here, but honestly, this last year, the way we've been able to respond to the COVID-19 and the social injustice pandemics has been really just amazing to watch. I think one thing that comes to mind is a lot of organizations and brands and corporates and teams wanted to make an impact. I think it's so amazing when there's organizations like Laureus who are already embedded in communities and have those local connections to be able to invest through them. And so we had a partnership with Degree, the deodorant brand, and Kevin Durant, who were able to invest $1 million into communities across the US to help kids continue to keep moving and stay safe during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so it wasn't us going out and searching for those. We had a list of 100 that had come to us and said, we need help, we need support, this is what we're dealing with. And so it was just amazing to be able to take those resources and put it into those organizations and literally have phone calls of, I'm going to be able to sleep well.
We have a conversation on diversifying sport philanthropy, followed by sport for development. And our final mini session will be on disability adaptivity in sports. And now I'll turn it over to our student intern, Ashley Beecham.
Hi, Ashley.
Hi, how are you? There's been so many great conversations so far. So my name is Ashley Beecham. I am a current student at Howard University. I am an intern here at Champions for Philanthropy, and I'm so excited to be able to talk with you today, Corinne and Shanell. So thank you for just being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. One of my first questions I have is, can you both just start off by sharing a little bit about yourselves and your backgrounds?
Yes. I'm not sure. I don't see a box for Corinne, so I will start while she gets hers up.
No problem.
Sharing a little bit about myself. So I oversee sports partnerships at UNICEF USA, which essentially means that I work with a number of our professional athletes, teams, and league relationships to really rally them to shout from the rooftops on behalf of the world's most vulnerable children.
Okay, no problem. My next question that I do have, what struggles, if any, have you faced as a Black woman working in sport for philanthropy?
Well, you know, I think a woman in sports in general has its own challenges and obstacles. I think that can have its own feats, but I think what has given me the opportunity to lean into it is being a woman of color. We look around and we see in sports that so many people look just like us. And I think it's super well received when you can share some of your expertise, your authentic voice, your insights, your perspective with athletes that look like you, because they respect that. They can understand that your journey may have been similar to theirs, or at least you understand or feel what they're going through. So I think in terms of philanthropy, it also gives us an amazing opportunity to impact different groups that need a voice. And I think the reality is, with an athlete or a team or a league speaks up, people listen. And so sometimes they might need a little bit of extra support in finding that right voice. A number of the athletes that I've been working with used to be so afraid to speak up about causes that mattered. And now they're so empowered, because not only is there philanthropic support network helping, their brand is, their agents are, their partners, their teams, and even just the way the world is receiving it as well.
Thank you so much. Hello, Corinne. I wanted to ask you the same questions that you were here. The first one was just, can you just start off by sharing a little bit about yourself and your background?
Hi, sorry, my first meeting of the day ran 45 minutes late, so it's thrown off the rest of my schedule. Hopefully you can see me. I'm at Copeland, so y'all can just deal with it. It'll be fine. I can step into the light here a little bit, but my name is Corinne. I'm the executive director of the Winning is Leadership Academy. It's a nonprofit / social movement I started in 2015 to develop the next generation of minorities who want to work in sports business. And Maria Taylor and I started this because too often we were sitting in rooms with people who didn't look like us, and we wanted to combine her platform and my charm to create more opportunities.
Perfect. My next question that I have, because I just asked Shanell, what struggles, if any, have you faced? You just spoke on it a little bit, but what struggles, if any, have you faced as a woman working in sport philanthropy?
People just not taking me serious. And honest, I mean, if I'm being as transparent as possible, I think a lot of it is, especially in the last maybe 8 months, there have been a lot of white savior complexes stepped in and kind of hinder the good work that a lot of people in our community have already done the last couple of years. And now that they feel woke, or, you know, now they understand what the problem is, they're going to come in and help. And it's like, you could just provide the resources for those already doing it versus taking the resources from us to now do your own thing, because you are going to be able to get into the rooms that we haven't been able to get into the last 5 years. And people are, I'm adding some light to my life here. You are able to get into the rooms that a lot of us aren't able to get into. So you're able to get those resources, whereas you could have just taken those resources and uplifted us and supported us. So that's probably been the biggest challenge, and something that I've been preaching a lot on.
Perfect. I just want to ask, what methods have both you guys used to increase diversity in this field?
Well, this is one of them, super cliche answer, but I think as many opportunities to reach back to help others. I often speak at my alma mater. I speak to a lot of minority sports groups. Even the interns that I hire, I try to be incredibly intentional about hiring diverse talent, creating a pipeline, coaching them even after they are no longer interning for me or working with me. How can I help you? Who can I connect you with?
Yeah, ditto. All these things. And I tried to do a good job of making myself available. It has gotten harder and harder. Obviously, I think we are like we are a hot commodity now. Everybody wants our time. So, but I try to make myself available to come on platforms like this and share my story. And I try to be authentic with if someone reaches out to me and they are about their business on LinkedIn, not just like, hey, I'd like to learn about your journey, but because that gets tired and played out. But if somebody reaches out and says, hey, this is what I'm trying to do, this is why I'm reaching out to you, would you like to spend some time? Most definitely, you're going to have my time. And I think that's just something to be cognizant of. Like if Shanell, is that how you say it?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Like I would like to think that if somebody came to you correct, you're gonna give them what they need. Like if they came to you and say, hey, Miss Mosley, like I see this is the work that you're doing. I'm looking to do something like this in my own community. Could we find some time to talk about your fundraising efforts? I will give you time for that.
Yep.
But I'm not gonna give you time for is the questions that you can find with a good old Google search. So like, hey, can you tell me about your journey and your career? Because LinkedIn is going to tell you that. I got a couple articles out there that's going to tell you that already. So it's going to be, I'm all here about uplifting the community, but I want people to understand that you have to meet me halfway.
These are amazing answers, you guys. I want to ask another question. What advice do you have for students pursuing a similar career path, trying to bridge the gap between diversity and inclusion in sport philanthropy?
I'll let you start.
Well, I think the moral of the story is, I think when I started down my journey in sports, I used to think that there was a cookie cutter approach to sports philanthropy. And the reality is it's not. I think it's all about how you map out your story, your narrative, because everybody's path could look very different to get to the same destination. And so it's like, what do you want your journey to look like? And although it may not right now, what intentional things can you put as a part of your story to help build out?
Create your own opportunities that may not pay you in money, in cash. Like when I started out, I would reach out to someone who didn't have an internship, didn't have any head count to do anything. But I was like, hey, can I provide this asset to your team? And I got paid in food, or I got paid in, I'm really good about food. Or I got paid in networking opportunities and being strategic with that. So sport philanthropy is not like being LeBron James' agent. It's not that glamorous thing. So a lot of times organizations like ours are gonna we're not making it rain by any means on the intern, but we always need the help. But the good thing is a lot of people know our heart. And if you do good work for us, we're going to do what we can to put you in the position to achieve your goals. So yeah, I love your head nod, Shanell, because you already know.
I have myself on mute because I'm just like, go ahead. Yep. Accurate.
Amazing.
So hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, it did. You guys have been answering everything. We just have less than 1 minute. I just want to see if you guys have any final thoughts that you want to leave to students, just because this event is so important to me as myself. So do you guys have any final thoughts you want to leave with us today?
Closed mouths don't get fed. That's all I got to say.
For me, if you walk with purpose, you collide with destiny.
Boom, we just dropping hashtags on you just like that.
Okay. I just want to say thank you both for you guys just being able for this amazing conversation. I've learned so much, and now I will be able to turn it over to Catherine, who's going to introduce the next session.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Catherine.
Hello. So, hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Burns. I'm a public relations major at Syracuse University, also currently a marketing and communications intern at Champions for Philanthropy. And I'm very excited to introduce Alésha Smith to lead this session. So welcome, Alésha.
Hey, everyone. So excited to be on. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really stoked to be a part of this conversation.
So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and then what your role is at Up to Us Sports?
Yeah, so my name is Alésha Smith. Really got my start playing basketball. I played basketball and got a college scholarship and had the opportunity to play overseas, but decided I was much more interested in social justice and finding my own way in empowering communities. So turned down that opportunity to play professional basketball and went into community organizing. So moved to Brooklyn, New York with my Southern accent and worked in some of the most under-resourced communities within Brooklyn, Brownsville, Coney Island, East New York, and really worked to empower those communities and work with the communities. So fast forward a bit, 2 years later, I learned about Up to Us and the work that Up to Us does, and saw that I could marry my love for social justice and empowering communities and empowering young people with my love for sport in general. So I work as a program manager at Up to Us, where I get to do the work of helping to train sports coaches to understand their responsibilities as mentors for young people.
That's awesome. So what specifically is sport for development? Yeah,
so sport for development really is understanding the transformational power of sport. And it's really not overstated enough. Like, sport can change the entire world when done intentionally. Whether we're talking about the power sport has to build communities or create opportunities for young people, or just really reveal what is within us. You know, if I asked 100 people that played sport, what is the lesson that they got out of sport? I guarantee, and I put my life on this, that a majority of them would not say, I learned how to Euro step and finish at the basket, or I learned how to throw the ball down the field. What I believe they would say is something like, I learned communication skills. I learned confidence. I learned resilience. I learned teamwork. So those moments are so important when we talk about sport for development and doing it intentionally. And with that understanding, we can not only just change and develop young people, we can change and develop this whole entire world through sport.
I've played my fair share of sports growing up, so I know exactly what you mean. So,
absolutely.
What is your opinion on how sports play a role in benefiting and developing youth, especially with the kids you've worked with in New York City? I know you answered it a little bit, but if you want to elaborate on it a little bit.
Yeah, so I guess just speaking about myself, I grew up as the only girl in the family. I have an older brother and a younger brother, both 6'6", and I'm 5'6.5". So being able to play sports, I was always around the guys playing on the blacktops in the parks. But when I finally had the opportunity to play with girls and to be around young women that love the game, it changed my life, because the stereotypes that girls face, you know, we're catty, we're mean, we can't play well with each other. And then just to think about those stereotypes that hit Black women and women of color, and those are amplified. So to be able to play sport with women and Black women and to create a sisterhood was so important, and it changed my entire life. So I have sisters now because of sport that I can call on. I'm in a group message with my high school teammates or my college teammates I could call on at any moment. So sports developed me in that way. It gave me sisterhood. It taught me resilience. You know, I wasn't supposed to be playing college basketball as a 5'6" undersized guard. I wasn't supposed to finish out my college career after taking a hit in my back and having to have back surgery, and was told that I may not be able to walk again, you know, and I definitely wasn't supposed to finish out my career, but I rehabbed, I got the surgery, I rehabbed and was able to finish my career, my college career, and sport taught me how strong I was. You know, like everything that I thought I didn't have, I had it. And it taught me resilience. And if I could get through this situation, I could get through anything. So those lessons are some things that I echo to young people, but then also challenge them because we all learn our own very unique lessons within sport. And it's so important to look at those aspects. So along with like the individual level of what we get out of sport and like the development there, I also think we underestimate how sport can transform and change communities. And how it can change the world. So I hate the narrative that we tell young people, you know, use your sport and you can get out of your community or get this basketball scholarship and you'll be able to leave. But if I believe in the transformational power of sport, I also believe that sports can change that community and create resources. And you don't have to be the stellar star athlete to do it, because sports create so many opportunities. So I think that's really some of the things that I echo. One, sports absolutely develops people on the individual level, but it has the opportunity to change and transform communities.
That's awesome. And that actually leads right into my next question. So with Black History Month being last month, and then we have Women's History Month this month, how does Up to Us contribute to supporting these communities?
Yeah, so we really work to make sure that the coaches that we work with reflect the communities that they're working in. So over 80% of the coaches that we work with look like the students that they're working with, which is important. Representation matters, and understanding the community context really matters. So that, as well as we've hosted social justice symposiums. We definitely understand that social justice issues are not new, but it's so important that we're a part of the charge and are helping to create that change. In regards to like women's history and honoring women in the space, we have our Keep Girls in Sports curriculum that we partner with Adidas that really just speaks to the importance of girls in sports. You know, girls who play sports are less likely to become teen mothers. Girls who play sports are more likely to have a positive self-image. Girls who play sports are less likely to stay in an abusive relationship. So understanding the statistics, we get it, and we want to make sure that we not only keep girls in sports, but then also get more female coaches in the space. So we're working on that as well. And we also have had Women's in Sports Symposium. So we're doing a lot in that space, and I would say keep your eyes and ears open for some more of our work there, but you can check out our website to take a peek at the curriculum as well as some of the symposium work that we had.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what other sport for development organizations besides Up to Us do you think do a great job?
Yeah, I think there's so many, and hopefully I don't blank on the names, but Peace Players, but specifically their Brooklyn chapter, they've just doing a tremendous job in Brownsville and really building up the young people there and working with the community alongside. I talk a lot about community work because, again, I come from a community organizer lens, and not thinking that you have the answers, but going into communities and working with those leaders within the communities to transform communities is so important. So I think Peace Players and Sally at Peace Players are just doing great work. There's Grow Our Game with blanking on her, Chiney Jones. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, Chiney, but just doing just great work with young girls and getting more young girls in the space and learning how to play basketball and building up and develop young women. So there's Grow Our Game NYC, and there's just so many other organizations. And I would say I would definitely challenge you all to just start researching because they're out there. And there's so much work in the space that's being done, and they're just looking for enthusiastic young people to jump on.
Yeah, that's great. Those are some great organizations to get involved with. So how has the mission and focus of Up to Us Sports changed as a result of the pandemic?
There is no sports right now. So they're having to see how can they really impact young people beyond just the basketball, beyond the football. So our coaches are actually doing that, and the mission is being amplified in that way. But it has shifted how we've had to carry out the mission. So all of our trainings that we do for coaches are now virtual, and our national training team does a stellar job at that. We also have our Up to Us at Home page that has a bunch of resources on the page that speak to really all the resources that you need nationally as to do well as a coach, whether we're talking about COVID resources and coaching during COVID, or if we're talking about just sports specific tips and tricks to the trade, it's on our Up to Us at Home page. And then any advice that I would have for young people or students that want to be a part of the work, you can definitely become a coach. But then I think just my overall message would be, do not be afraid to go and do it and to really use your own experience. I am at home actually in Georgia right now because of the pandemic, and I've gotten the chance to use everything that I've learned. I'm actually a graduate student as well, so I've got a chance to use some of the things that I've learned to impact my own community. I'm working to rename a street in honor of a young woman that I knew who was killed because of gun violence. I'm right now working and mentoring the young girls from my high school. And I've been hosting voter registration drives because Georgia was a huge pivotal state. I've had the opportunity to do COVID testing drives, and this is all happening during the pandemic. So do not underestimate yourself and your impact, because we can change this whole entire world. It doesn't take professional athletes. It really just takes folks who are dedicated to the work, and just a group of us really rallying in that effort. So I think that's all I would echo. Do not be afraid to just go and do it.
That's a great way to end it. So thank you, Alésha, for that awesome conversation. And I have to turn it over to Melissa now to introduce the next session.
Hello, my name is Melissa George, and I'm a sophomore at Fordham University, and I am so excited to introduce our next panelist, Ahalia Lettenberger. Ahalia, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Okay, so to begin, would you mind sharing a little bit about your journey to becoming a member of Team USA, as well as an NCAA D1 athlete?
Yeah, so I was born with a condition called arthrogryposis amyoplasia, and it's a musculoskeletal disorder that affects me in my lower limbs. So it causes muscle weakness and joint restrictions. So I use a wheelchair to get around far distances, so like to get around college campus. And I can walk short distances, like around my dorm room. And so growing up, sports were like a huge part of my life. Growing up, I played soccer and softball, but eventually those just became too hard on my legs. And so I found swimming when I was like 10, and swimming really was a whole different experience. As soon as I started swimming, I just fell in love with the freedom that the water gave me. And then I discovered Paralympic swimming in 2013. And for those who don't know, the Paralympics are the equivalent to the Olympics, but for athletes with disabilities. So they're every 4 years in the same place as the Olympics, but just with different athletes. And Paralympic swimming really changed my life in helping me see my disability in a completely different way. And it really helped me accept myself. And so I made my first international competition when I was 13, and then I qualified for the US Paralympic swimming national team when I was 17. And so, yeah, so I'm a current member of the US Paralympic swimming national team, and I'm also a swimmer at Rice University.
That is absolutely so cool. So that kind of brings me to my next question. What are some things that you would like to see change within the sports industry to be more accommodating to para-athletes?
Definitely. So there's definitely been a lot of progress made, but there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of inclusion of athletes with disability and awareness of Paralympic sports. So a big thing is inclusion. Para-athletes and athletes with disabilities just aren't included in the same way as other athletes do, and they don't have the same opportunities. And so an example of this is in NCAA sports, athletes with disabilities can't really score points or qualify for big meets or big competitions like the NCAA championships or other things. And so inclusion in high school and collegiate sports is definitely a big change that needs to be made. And in addition to this, awareness and publicity of athletes with disabilities is a big improvement that can be made, because a lot of people in the United States just have no idea what the Paralympics are, or have no idea that these athletes with disabilities compete at an elite level of sport. And so publicity and awareness for that is a big change that can be made.
Great, and that actually kind of brings me to my next question. Based on your experience, what are some of the more common barriers for individuals living with disabilities who want to compete competitively? Or that's kind of redundant, but in sports.
Yeah, athletes with disabilities or people with disabilities who want to compete in sports definitely have additional barriers that can hinder their participation in sports. One of these is just cost of equipment and accessibility to sport opportunities. For athletes with disabilities, there's a lot of additional equipment that needs to be purchased. That's different than able-bodied athletes. So for instance, for an amputee who wants to participate in running, they have to find a running blade and purchase that. And for an individual in a wheelchair who wants to participate in cycling, they have to purchase a separate hand cycle. And these types of equipment can be like super expensive. And so that's definitely a major barrier that these individuals can face. And another barrier, which I kind of touched on earlier, is just inclusion. And so growing up, I was definitely lucky in that my community was super supportive of me, and I was given the opportunities to compete for my high school team and compete for different club teams. But for other athletes, they don't have these same opportunities. So like participation in high school sports and inclusion is a huge barrier just because of a lack of knowledge of Paralympic sports. And so with more education and awareness of these opportunities, I think that we could help to decrease these barriers.
Awesome. So you talked a little bit about the technology that it takes for para-athletes to compete. So with rapid advancements in technology, as well as at least a little bit, if not more, growing interest in the para-athletics, where do you hope to see that sector of sports growing within maybe the next 5 years or so?
I think there's a lot of room for growth, especially in the next 5 years. Just in the past few years or so, there's been a lot of growth within Paralympic sports, especially with awareness and publicity. But that's definitely an area of growth for the future. And so like they just announced that the Paralympics will have a lot more coverage on NBC for Tokyo. And so that's a huge step of growth. And so hopefully in the next 5 years, we'll see even more publicity and like, yeah, publicity and advertisement of Paralympic sports and Paralympic athletes. And in terms of technology, yeah, there have been so many advancements in different types of equipment for athletes with disabilities. And so I think in the next 5 years or 10 years, there'll definitely be more affordable equipment available, hopefully, and that will help to increase accessibility of sports to individuals with disabilities.
Awesome. And then our final question for this mini session, on a more personal note, as both an athlete and a bioengineering student, I did a little snooping. What do you hope to accomplish both in the long run, both in your platform as an athlete, as well as your future work in that bioengineering field?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I'm currently studying bioengineering here, and I really hope to use this. I also want to go to medical school, so I really hope to use that platform to help other people with disabilities like find independence and acceptance in the way that I have through sport. And so I really hope to help design technology, as we were sort of just talking about, to help people with disabilities like find that independence and increase participation in sports and increase opportunities in other areas for them to grow in the way that I have, and hopefully use my platform to increase participation in sports and in just increase inclusion and accessibility in all areas, really.
Well, Holly, thank you so much for joining us today. You have such great insights, and I'm really excited to see what you'll be able to do in the future, and hopefully see you at the Tokyo Olympics, or the Olympics in my eyes, they're all the same to me. But thank you so much for coming. And I will now turn this over to co-founders of Champions for Philanthropy, Rochelle Mays and Alésha Powell, for our fireside chat.
Thank you so much, Melissa and Ahalia. We are excited to introduce our fireside speaker, Chris Dickerson. As a high school, college, and professional baseball player, Chris understands what dedication, hard work, and a drive to win means off and on the field. He made his major league debut with the Reds in 2008. His MLB career spanned 8 seasons and teams, including the Cincinnati Reds, New York Yankees, Baltimore Orioles, and the Cleveland Indians. Although playing professional baseball was always his dream, Chris's passion has always been the environment and trying to find solutions to the growing environmental crisis. The huge amounts of plastic cups used at every major league game and in the locker room prompted him to team up with fellow baseball player Jack Castle to establish Players for the Planet, an organization that brings professional athletes together to inspire communities and build awareness of the growing environmental crisis. In 2009, Chris had the opportunity to speak at the United Nations as part of the UN Climate Change Conference. He was awarded the Seal the Deal Award as recognition for his efforts of using his voice and platform of professional sports to incite change to build a more sustainable world. He was also one of the global athletes working for environmental change, highlighted in the book, Champions for Change, Athletes Making a World Difference. Chris continues to be involved in baseball with appearances as an in-studio analyst on MLB Network, and he currently sits on the advisory board for the Players Alliance, a group of over 150 former and current Black MLB players focused on building equitable systems in order to change the trajectory of diversity throughout the sport of baseball. Chris, we are so excited to have you here today, and now we're going to get into our questions.
Thank you.
Chris, so Champions for Philanthropy, we're familiar with the amazing work that Players for the Planet does because we were lucky enough, fortunate enough to have worked with you all in the past. But for the rest of the audience, if you'd like to tell us a little bit more about the important work that Players for the Planet does.
Sure, and I appreciate you having me on. Good to see you as always. So 2008, I think it's just been a thing in progress. I grew up in Southern California, and so understanding, some of the issues that we go through down here, whether it's drought or being by the ocean, toxic runoff in coastal communities, biodiversity loss. Very fortunate to have that type of access to these different topographies and different environments within Southern California and California in general. And then to learn about, many different things under the sun as it relates to the environment and our natural habitat. So it was just one of those things. My dad was a big recycling person. He kind of like handcrafted, this recycling system at home. And I early on, I understood the importance of recycling at least, and, just kind of managing our waste. And it wasn't until 2007 where I was home for New Year's. I had the flu, one of the few times that I get sick, and I had the opportunity to see an inconvenient truth, and that kind of spurred me on to the next level of environmentalism and wanting to do my part. And it's just very basic. The next year, I simply saw the amount of plastic that we used before batting practice, after batting practice, and then just started to put these numbers together. And I just wanted to do my part on a really small scale, and just to see if I could cut down on the amount of waste that we go through in the clubhouse. And simple initiative turned into getting 50 bottles for my teammates, and we were able to cut down on half of that plastic as guys started reusing these, traveling with them. And the story kind of blew up, and I saw the response from both the fans and players around the league, and I felt like it was important to have this type of platform to pursue and encourage and inspire other people to kind of elevate their environmental stewardship. And Players for the Planet is what we came up with.
That's incredible. Can you just talk a little bit more about that, enacting change within the baseball organizations? I think that's just such a great thing.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about baseball is it's probably the most wasteful sport. If we think about it, there's no other team or athlete that spends more time at the field than baseball. Have 3 meals, but it's played every single day. Every night there's a game across the league with an average of 30,000 fans, and that produces basically like an average of 15 tons of trash every single night for 162 games going into playoffs. You're looking at roughly 8 to 8.5 months of continual waste. And so kind of understanding that and simple changes that not only we can make for athletes and to promote environmental stewardship with our fan bases, but getting teams to understand the amount of waste that they go through and how they can make more systematic changes, from concessions to how the clubhouse and food waste is handled, how recycling is handled around the stadium, and then just from agricultural purposes, reusing and composting the grass shavings from the fields into local fields. And so kind of opening the door to more operations and how sports teams can reduce their footprint. And so early on, it was interesting. It was just like 10 or 15 athletes that were just buddies and teammates or ex-teammates from Southern California. And so the word started to get out that it wasn't just baseball. We had NHL, MLS, NBA, NFL. And so, coming from, different backgrounds was kind of an early obstacle. But now that we're seeing, where we're at and people understanding the peril and the pressure that we're under to do better, the narrative among athletes has changed a lot. And I think that's been one of the large pieces of the huge increase in participation with athletes these days.
That's really wonderful. And you talk here about the work that you all do in the baseball side here in the States. You want to talk a little bit more about the work that you all have done in the Dominican Republic?
Yeah, so that was kind of a fluke. I think that was like my third trip to the UN. I was a guest of Parlay for the Oceans, attending World Oceans Week, and it was a week after that. We saw the CNN video of the plastic wave, and the plastic crisis, like, in front of our face, like in action, and how these heavy rains wash all this trash and plastic from these river communities out into the ocean, and it washes up on the beach. And if you're an environmentalist, they would have labeled the video graphic images, because it was like 60 feet from the shoreline. It was probably 60 feet of foot thick plastic all the way out. It was an unbelievable scene. And so I had the idea, since our Parlay had operations in the DR already, is that we can get some of the athletes to get out there and do a cleanup and bring more awareness to what's happening. And that was 2018. And just outside of that, kind of proving the plan of this is leveraging the platform and the attention and the reach that these athletes have to inspire other people, whether it's through social media. And that's exactly what happened. It's taking these guys that, Dominican athletes and baseball players in general look up to and see that they're making a difference, that they're out there personally getting their hands dirty. And that has a tremendous effect on younger generations and younger players, as we saw, because we had a huge amount of reach out from some of the other Dominican athletes and the Dominican MLB academies, as far as wanting to get their kids more involved in community efforts, and particularly environmental efforts in addressing this plastic crisis. So having Robinson Cano out there and Ahmed Rosario with the Mets just kind of fueled the next 2 or 3 cleanups, and having three athletes to with the Yankees and the A's academies out there, to having 10 athletes, and then having 21 Dominican players and American players joining in cohesively to bring more attention into get involved with the program. And so now we've gone with we've had like 5 Dominican athletes, and now we're roughly almost 25. Looking at the list that we haven't even posted on the website or released publicly yet.
That's so incredible.
We'll continue to do that. And so we were lucky enough to have teams see the impact and what we're trying to do. And the Milwaukee Brewers and SC Johnson signed on last year as part of the Save the Ocean campaign, in which for every save, $1,000 donated to Players for the Planet. That money is then used to further fund and expand our cleanups, not just from 1 a year, but for 10 just for this season. And then to provide valuable education programs that the MLB academies will have the option to take as part of their elective courses, and the surrounding middle school and high school. So roughly we have the chance to impact over 1,500 kids this year as more and more teams sign on for this program. And then they'll also physically participate in the cleanups as public health conditions allow, later this summer when the Dominican Summer League starts. And then that will all kind of conclude with Chairman and CEO Fish Johnson from SCJ coming down for our big celebrity cleanup somewhere in December.
Such amazing work. Wow. Congratulations on that. So when you started Players for the Planet in 2008, our world environmental situation has gotten worse. How do you continue to adapt your message to meet current climate crisis needs?
That's an interesting question, because I don't know how to necessarily answer it, because I feel like just where we were at and how we kind of just ran through the warning signs. 2010 was like the cutoff. And when I first spoke at the UN, it was part of a 350.org, 350.org movement. And that was a campaign to keep the carbon parts per million under 350. And since then, we've completely shot through that. So that was like that 10-year warning where it's like, if we go by and we don't make a change within 10 years, then we're going to be critically endangered. So we've kind of flown through that. So now what we're seeing is kind of like a panic among corporations to go net zero by a certain date, whether it's 2030 or 2050, which even then, will be really difficult. But with that, there's been more education. And so that's where the narrative among the athletes has changed, as more of these kids that are just in the minor leagues or signing out of college are starting to understand. And even the guys that, were first on board have a greater understanding over where we're going and what they can personally do to change their behaviors, and ultimately how to spread the word to, what we have to do as a society to do better. So that's been really interesting to see the last couple years. I wish that urgency was there in 2010. But understanding like what I've heard and seeing the reports that have come out of the UN, the impact report, we're not in great shape. So having guys like this that are now kind of understanding the danger that we're in, I think that message becomes much more urgent now, and I think guys are much more willing and open to completely changing a lot of their behaviors, and then more to promote best practices as professional teams and sports leagues adopt it as well, become a lot easier for fans and players to see these changes and be educated about some of the things that they can take home and integrate into their own lifestyle.
That's incredible. So how do you think your skills as a professional baseball player or athlete in general have translated to your work in founding and managing players for the planet?
I think, teamwork is number one. I think that's the biggest thing, as athletes in general, they always say the value in sports is the lessons that you learn for accountability, responsibility, focus and sacrifice, really. To get to any elite level in any sport, you're going to have to make sacrifices, and you're going to have to, time management is a large part of that. And so understanding that, getting into a routine is a big deal too. It's whatever you have to do to get ready in the morning. If you'd like to read, go work out, read, go through your email, and then kind of check off certain tasks for the day. It's no different than, getting up in the morning, getting ready for a game. You get up, you get breakfast, go back to sleep for an hour and a half, wake up, go to lunch, do the stuff that you have to do, work out, get treatment, go take extra ground balls, come back, get ready for the game, turn off all distractions and kind of lock in for 3.5 hours. And it's that type of discipline as an athlete that really translates over into being, a business owner, an entrepreneur, or really anything. So I think athletes will always have a leg up as far as what they experience on the field at a high level, and being able to take that mental fortitude and translate that into their professional lives.
That's great. Thanks so much. So can you tell us more about your role and work with the Players Alliance? And for those who don't know, can you explain what the Players Alliance is?
Yeah, the Players Alliance is a result of everything that happened post George Floyd. It was a group that was put together. Honestly, it was put together because of the lack of response that Major League Baseball had to the events that transpired from George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. And the guys simply wanted to take it into their own hands and make an announcement amongst the black players. So it started out with Cameron Maybin and D. Gordon getting on the phone and be like, hey, if we can get some guys together, like, let's put together a video ourselves. So we went to Christina Coleman, who's a good friend of ours that runs a branding company. And we simply said, hey, if we get X amount of guys together, can you do a video? She said, yes. 10 guys turned into 20, 20 turned into 40, 50 turned into 100, 100 turned into 150. So we put together a script. We came out with a video. It was amazing. All the biggest names in the sport were involved. And then it was so great that it was played in every stadium on opening day for the next week. And then it was kind of one of the things was like, okay, cool. We made our announcement. Now what? You know, what are we about? What do we want? What are our goals? What are we about? What do we want to accomplish? And, you know, looking kind of around the league and some of the numbers, you know, as these guys are making their video submissions, you know, some of these guys are the only African Americans on their team. If not, you know, there were 2 major league teams that didn't have a single African American on the team. And then looking at the general population of only 7.7 African Americans on opening day rosters last year is a huge problem as it continues to decline. So, you know, we took a deep dive and, you know, kind of assess what the issues are among these communities and why more Black kids aren't playing baseball. And, you know, it comes down to access as, you know, access to equipment, access to safe spaces, access to challenging and you know, well-maintenance little leagues. And so that was one of the things is like, how can we provide more safe spaces? How can we get these kids equipment? How can we mentor some of these young players to understand, you know, the situations that they're in and being in a predominantly white sport and, you know, just getting more interest around baseball, because right now the way out of some of these communities is just through football or basketball. So we want to change that. But with that, you have to have more people that look like you on the field. And that's what inspired me to play baseball when I was younger, is because I had the Ken Griffey Juniors, I had the Kenny Loftons, the Torrey Hunters, all these guys that look like me that I wanted to emulate. And so we don't really have much of that the last couple of years. And, you know, whether that's on Major League Baseball and their lack of marketing, because there certainly are the Black players that are the superstars of the game. They're just unknown. So, you know, banding together and understanding that we're here to help. We want to create programs to get out into the public, to get out into these communities and provide them the necessary tools to succeed.
That's inspiring work, and kudos to you for being a part of that. And Players Alliance really is making an impact. And speaking of social justice, one thing that people don't normally correlate environmental issues as a social justice issue. I know we've talked about that before. Do you want to explain a little bit to the audience why environmental protection is a social justice issue?
100%. So one thing that we're working with a bunch of teams right now, and, you know, back to the question, as more of these athletes have come on board, they're being more educated, is a lot of these guys have specific concerns about the environment, which they're most focused on. And so that's why we came up with these individual focus, whether it's oceans, whether it's conservation, whether it's e-waste or recycling, repurpose, is because all these guys have specific interests. And one of those, Brent Suter of the Milwaukee Brewers, his big thing is urban land renewal. And so kind of bringing light to that. And the more I looked into it, I understood obviously the lack of tree canopy within urban communities and the effects that has, and the lack of tree cover, both from affecting urban communities, predominantly African Americans, and some of these communities that are hotter don't absorb as much of the heat because they have a lack of tree cover and canopy, to filter out particulates, pollution, in which again African Americans are much more exposed to, especially with asthma, hypertension. So the role that trees play is really significant within these urban communities. And so looking to expound on some of these efforts and really draw attention to that and help, you know, number one, help out, but more is providing more attention to that crossover of athletics and social justice and equity to environmental justice. And if you really dig deeper, you know, there's a stat that 50% of all, you know, the population that lives within 3 to 5 miles around hazardous waste sites in the US are people of color. So understanding how that crosses over to our health, both as athletes within the community, but also the mental, you know, the mental load that is relieved by having green spaces, by having trees, scientifically shows a lower heart rate and a much more general well-being when you have these spaces within these urban communities. So that's a big thing for us. In going into this year, we're looking at a program to do an all-star game, to do massive tree planting in some of these urban communities in Atlanta, and partnering with the Players Alliance as we did the pull-up tour where we spanned 33 cities, and the Gear for Good program, which was a 30-city operation, which we sent boxes to every major league clubhouse to collect equipment that can then be given to the inner city. So with that, the emissions and the travel that was generated can be offset through trees in these same urban communities, not only just from a general standpoint of doing our best practices and offsetting the carbon emissions, but offering and using this as a platform to get more kids out into these green spaces, to elevate environmental literacy, and to provide them education about the importance of trees, how they affect their community, how they raise property values, and how they're beneficial to their health within these communities. So really excited about that. And we're really excited about the response that a lot of these major league teams have had as far as integrating that into their community programs this season.
Such amazing work. And we have one last question before we get into our audience questions here. So you've dedicated yourself to using your platform to make an impact. How would you encourage others, especially students, to build awareness of issues that are important to them?
Yeah, band together, put together, sustainability groups on campus. It's really interesting because we've had such a crazy response from college students over the last 6 months. And we now have a student athlete kind of advisory volunteer board, because there are student athletes from schools all across the country that are actively involved in their student athlete environmental groups, or actively pursuing initiatives within their campus, whether it's addressing food waste, using reusable, using reusables within the athletic department, finding more opportunities to have recycling programs both on the field and in some of the sports facilities. So we have a really active group that started out with 5 kids, 6 months ago, and we've grown to 20 kids. And so we want, these champions of the environment on their campus to formulate initiatives and to create groups, and then, use their resources to go to the head of the athletic department or the head of sustainability group, if they have one at campus, and really kind of come up with plans and speak up to their university, because I think there's a lot of resources that can be given to these types of projects on their universities. And all it takes is one, and I think other people, other students will follow it. This is a new generation that's going to be particularly affected by climate change down the road, and so I think that leadership group is there within this generation, and it's just about a matter of coming together and banding together and voicing, their opinions and concerns, and more importantly, is coming together and finding solutions that they can bring to the table at their university or within their student body. So I would, advise, don't be shy. We have groups that are, from Stanford. Our kids are from Stanford, UCLA. And they're all, they all have no problem going to the athletic director and being like, listen, can we do like an e-waste program? Can we address the amount of apparel waste that we go through? And just kind of lifting up your voices, because I found that, with their voices and being able to translate those to corporate America, and going to a Nike and be like, listen, we have these individuals that are the leaders on their teams, and they're, they have an understanding that they have to do better by not only the environment and finding alternative ways to get rid of their stuff at the end of the season, but this, this comes up to you, this comes to the university to be responsible for that. And more importantly, it comes to consumer groups and apparel groups like Nike, Under Armour, that can directly make a change, that can reduce the amount of packaging that this stuff comes in. They can provide, bins to collect shoes at the end of the season. So that was one of the big things that we're working on, is we're doing, collegiate Nike collection days, where these Nike schools that are in the Pac-12, whether it be Stanford, USC, Arizona State, can come out, and all the old stuff, Nike can come collect all the old gear and stuff that can be recycled and repurposed at the end of the season. But it starts with the students. It starts with the athletes to raise up and to find solutions, and people will listen.
That's really great advice. And I love that you are inspiring the next generation to pick up with this great cause. So now we're going to go to our audience questions. And we have a question. Are there any leagues or teams that specifically do a good job in regards to sustainability?
Yeah, MLB is doing a good job. I think there are 9 more teams that are going to be adopting LED lighting this season, which brings the total to 21 teams. And there are, some teams that are exceptional, probably the best in all of professional sports, like the San Francisco Giants, Seattle Mariners, and the St. Louis Cardinals, that always have roughly an 80% waste diversion program, which means a lot of their stuff is compostable. They have recycling bins to properly manage the waste for every game. Boston Red Sox integrated community garden and solar panels to provide power to the 1,100 TVs. And so there is a significant movement among some of these teams. We'd like to see more, obviously, as more teams can offset their travel, their carbon emissions for their travel for the entire season, but they're working towards it. The NHL does an incredible job, largely because there's such a greater understanding of the effects on a daily basis that these athletes witness coming from these cold weather climates, and how the climate changes every year, especially when you're talking about skating on ice. It melts later, and it freezes later, and it melts later. Their snow seasons have become shorter. So a lot of winter sports are particularly stepping up their game in sustainability and environmental issues, because it's a direct response to the everyday lifestyle of these winter sports athletes, whether it be hockey, skiing, snowboarding. They're making tremendous strides in that area. So MLB is they're doing work. They can always do more. The NFL can do more. And a large part of it does have to do with ownership. All these sports leagues do have initiatives as a league, but it has to come down to the owners and getting them on the same page, to where they're starting to put, more skin in the game and make significant commitments to the environment, such as the Cronkies have done with the NFL and some of their sports teams. And just a simple thing as like a major overhaul of aluminum cups to get away from single-use plastic.
Have a part in making the environment better. So Chris, we've actually come to the end of our discussion today. So I just want to thank you again so much for joining us.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, and I hopefully this was helpful. I love talking to you guys, and hopefully we can do this again sometime soon.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with the students on the call today, and we look forward to seeing that more of the amazing work that you guys will continue to do with Players for the Planet.
Yeah, so if there are students out there that are interested, we have a student group call every Tuesday. Our volunteers they're super involved. When it's not season, we've lost a couple of them because it's spring sports, so we've lost our swimmers and our lacrosse players, but we're always looking for student athletes and students in general to get more involved. And I think just having that crossover, what's happening on campus, what's happening in the sports and sustainability world, through that, I've learned a ton from these kids as far as what's happening, how to apply that same type of messaging to professional sports. So, we'd love to have the opportunity to work with you guys and to continue to build, more sustainable world with the younger generation.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Chris. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Wow, this has been such an incredible day. Thank you to Chris and our entire lineup of amazing speakers and student moderators for this incredible discussion. We appreciate all of you sharing your time and perspectives. To the viewers, thank you for joining us for this important dialogue. We will continue to have these impactful conversations, so please feel free to contact us with any questions that weren't answered during today's event. And you can find our contact information in the chat.
Michelle and I also want to give a special thanks to our team at Champions for Philanthropy, without whom this event would not be possible. As mentioned earlier, Krista's hard work and dedication to this event paid off. We would also like to thank our interns who also helped in making this possible, as well as our employees, Jamie and Christian. And today happens to be Employee Appreciation Day, so we want to give a special thank you to them, not just for the hard work that they did for putting on today's event, but the hard work that they do in general. So thank you. We would love to stay in touch with you all. Please be sure to follow us on social media at Champions for Philanthropy to keep up with our work and find out about future events. Thanks again. Have a great day. We appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, everyone.